our last person that we were waiting on. So can we get a call to order, please, from our chairman?
Surely. This is Steve King, the chair of the engineering committee. Call the meeting of the committee to order and turn it back over to Michael for some formalities, and probably Maria, I imagine.
Yes, Maria will now read our statement of necessity.
Thank you. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners Engineer Committee, which is taking place by electronic means utilizing the WebEx teleconference application on Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. Notice that this meeting was properly posted to the board's website. If there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 844-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that a necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting requires timely action by the body. That physical presence by a quorum of members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. As stated, this is a regularly scheduled meeting for the Tennessee Board of Architectural and Engineer Examiners Engineer Committee. The purpose of this meeting with members attending by teleconference is to discuss regularly scheduled matters of the committee. The WebEx teleconference application is being utilized in order to provide the most safe manner of meeting due to COVID-19. All voting will be conducted by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Just a reminder for everyone before we really start diving into things, if you are not speaking, please put your microphones or telephones on mute. I do detect some background noise coming from somewhere. I'm not quite sure where it is, but if you're not speaking, please go to mute. And now let me call a roll real quick so we can really get into things. Mr. King.
Here.
Mr. Bursai.
Here.
Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Mr. Heathcote.
I'm here.
And Mr. Barrick.
Here and unmuted.
Thank you, sir. Welcome. Let me see here. I've got too many things. Aside from the Rob Barrick introduction on the agenda, number one on the agenda, does anyone have any other changes? It seems like Rob has already known to the group.
Hey, Michael, this is Alton. Just a couple of things. One thing in particular. I've got a couple of changes to the minutes from the last meeting that I will email you tomorrow morning in advance of the full board meeting.
Okay, great. Please, Alton, when you do that, please include Morgan on that. Be glad to. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Michael?
Yes? Yes.
Hey, this is Ricky. One thing that is not on the agenda that we wanted to add as of yesterday, I got an email to review from Mr. Milton Edens, and I see that he is on the call with us here today regarding a question about stamping a letter that a code official requested. And so I wanted to add that discussion somewhere in the agenda, and maybe it would be appropriate to do that before we get into applications, since that's a one single issue.
Okay, we can do that.
Ricky, it is on the transmittal that I sent you all with the applications. It's under other.
Okay, thanks, Wanda.
And we can do that because he is on the phone with us, and we want to be mindful of his time. and not make him sit through everything else, we will put him right before applications and audits for review.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Just real quick, I know that Mr. Barrick is known to a number of you, but he is not known to a fair amount of folks who are on this call and who have, who have business or are staff members of this organization or this program. So, Mr. Barrick, I'd like to give the floor to you just for as long as, well, not as long as you like, a couple minutes, and maybe give yourself a little introduction and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'll be happy to do that. I thought it was my job to, as a new board member, to listen and learn and keep my mouth shut for a while, but I'll be happy to talk to you a little bit. I'm Rob Barrick. I have been with Smith Seckman Reed for 46 years. I'm a mechanical engineer by training out of Vanderbilt. I've been in Nashville most all my life, except for a year in Saudi Arabia and 3 years in Houston, Texas, when I opened an office down there. What else do you need to know? I was the CEO of Smith Seckman Reed for 32 years. I stepped down 3 years ago. I'm still the chairman and still employed there. Was active in ACEC for a number of years, served a couple of terms as president. And I think that'll about cover it unless you all have any questions.
I don't have any, sir, and thank you for that. I think there'll be plenty. There may be other questions. Tomorrow's a full board meeting, and I believe that I'll try and cover as much of that for you tomorrow as I can, but may call on you to reintroduce yourself to the full board tomorrow.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, after that, our next item is application, or excuse me, Mr. Edens.
Yes, sir. Ricky, since you sent that in, would you care to summarize the issue for us for the committee to discuss?
I'd be happy to, Steve. And what I'll do, Mr. Edens, I'm going to summarize the issue and then make a couple of comments, and then people can discuss and maybe point me in the right direction if I'm seeing something wrong. But first of all, a summary of the issue is Mr. Edens did some engineering plans for a town, and the code officials and town mayor are calling for a letter that is certified with his seal that says he's met all the codes. And this is in addition to having drawings that are with his stamp on that. And Mr. Edens has resisted some back to the town, and I applaud him for that, because a point that I will make is that engineers and architects doing building design, and I imagine other design is like this, but I know with building design, you really can't certify that you have met all codes because of a couple of things. One, you can have the exact same code and two different code officials looking at it, and they come to exactly opposite interpretations. So the code is not black and white. There are confusing passages in it, and it's up to the interpretation of the authority having jurisdiction. So you can't certify that you know how somebody's brain is going to work to interpret that. And the The second thing is there are multiple codes that may apply when you do design. And sometimes these codes contradict themselves. One code that's an international building code may be the exact opposite of a NFPA code. And so there again, you cannot certify that you're meeting all the codes that apply because they contradict each other. And even sometimes different sections of the code do. So I applaud, first of all, Mr. Edens and his effort in not wanting to certify something that really is inappropriate for that. Now, moving on to that, though, the other issue is our rules state where we must have a stamp, and that includes drawings and specifications and reports, among other things. And those are the things in our rules that state where you must have a stamp. I don't think that precludes you from stamping a letter that a code official requests of you, and other people stamp things. Like sometimes we get references with applications where people have stamped the references, and I don't know of a rule that excludes an engineer from stamping other things that don't appear in our rules. I don't think that there's any rule violation in stamping a letter to a code official. And so as far as that being a board issue, that is my understanding that I'm presenting to the board, the rest of the engineer committee here. And this could be a topic that we include the architects on in a full board meeting, because I think they are also asked to sign these certification letters. And I'll say, as a practitioner, not as a board member, but I have resisted these kind of letters. But however, when I consult with my liability insurer, I get some language from them that is acceptable, and say it in terms that I think is better from a liability and a practitioner language, like, will we have endeavored to meet all the applicable codes? That kind of language, but I would leave it to each design professional to talk with their liability insurer to get that language. So that kind of covers my take on this issue. And Steve, I'll turn it back over to you to get comments.
Thanks, Ricky. I think I agree with you on both those points. Anybody else on the committee have anything they'd like to say about that, or have any questions of Ricky?
Steve, this is Alton. If we can, and Michael, if it's not breaking protocol, I'd like to give Mr. Edens a chance to help us understand his specific issue with this problem. It may make some level of difference. I'd like to understand exactly what his situation was and what his concern was associated with signing that letter as he was requested to.
That's not a violation of protocol at all, Alton.
Very, very well. Mr. Edens, would you like to speak?
Steve, I'm just looking in the chat box. It looks like Mr. Edens is not really set up for audio. He was just tuning in to listen from what the chat box says.
Okay. So is there any other discussion from the board? I'm sorry, the committee.
Steve, this is Robert. I tend to agree with what Ricky said. I think, sometimes we use our stamp as a I'm thinking about bid tabulations. We stamp bid tabulations just to say that what we've done is that we've reviewed it, and we're comfortable with the information provided. And I'm also, I'm guessing this letter, but I agree with what Mr. Edens had in his correspondence, that when we stamp something, I mean, we're saying in our professional opinion that what we've stamped meets the codes, it meets, standard of care, it meets all those things. So to ask to sign another letter, I just, I don't understand the need for that. If you're asking somebody to verify their design's good, that does seem to be a little double dipping. If I understood what the correspondence was.
This is Rob. I agree with Ricky. One, most insurance companies will not insure you if you use the words warranty or certify. And it's not in the owner's beneficial interest to have the engineer do something that's not insurable under their professional liability insurance. And I think, using terms like "to the best of our knowledge" or we have endeavored, whatever. I mean, that's language again that your insurance company can help you with to satisfy the authority having jurisdiction and not get yourself into an uninsurable situation. We've had to stamp letters like that in other states just because a building code official asked for it. And I'm not too bothered by having to stamp a letter. The plans are already stamped, and it's just kind of belts and suspenders.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, Ricky. I was just thanks for that comment, Rob. Go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah, I don't know if people are seeing the comment from Mr. Edens in the chat box. He says, to answer Alton, my concern was the letter was redundant and overbroad and redundant and unnecessary. So I think he's kind of saying what Robert, kind of agreeing with Robert. So I think and those are all, I think all of that input is good for Mr. Edens. I guess the official business for the board is to say whether stamping such a letter to a code official is in violation of our rules, and I don't think it is. I don't, but I think that's what I'm hearing from the other engineer members, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that's correct, Ricky. And this is Steve, by the way, and I agree with you. Anything beyond that, I guess it's just sort of advice, like if, we've heard several people say consult your insurer on the language, but as far as the engineering committee is concerned, we don't see a violation of any of our rules to write a similar letter.
I think I got unmuted. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. Mr.
Yeah,
Edens, that's you, correct?
I don't do much of this stuff, so I had to mess around my computer to figure out how to do it. But my concern was that it was basically just overbroad. When you're opening up to, as one gentleman mentioned, everything in every code that was ever written, and I just didn't feel comfortable doing that, and so it was overbroad. And then the other thing is that the board has rules for sealing drawings, and I had done that, which Your seal on your drawings should speak for itself. But my point was, okay, if I have a question, I'll just ask the board. And if y'all are going to send me something saying that that didn't violate your rules, then, I can handle the insurance type stuff and I can word it such that it protects me, I think, without much trouble. Whether they will accept that wording or not, I don't know. We'll just have to get into that tomorrow or whatever. Tomorrow's another day. But if I just get something from y'all saying it's not violating a rule, but the rules are pretty strict on what you're supposed to seal, and that's not on the list. So, I just didn't want to violate a rule. And after the fact, the board to come back and say, well, you weren't supposed to seal that. I guess it might have been an abundance of caution, but I'd rather be right going in instead of trying to explain what I did going out.
Mr. Edens, this is Robert Campbell. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And I think some way to look at the rules is we've attempted to put a bunch of stuff in there or some things in there, but it's probably not a all-inclusive list. And there are times that we use, there are letters that I have stamped with that may be, some consider almost correspondence letters, because it makes the person getting them on the other end know that I'm certifying that everything in that letters, and it's not really a report or anything. It's just
Right.
that gives them some caution or some better feeling. And so I understand what you're saying. It's not specifically in there, but there are probably other instances that we don't have that, just because I don't think we could ever get every one of them in there that, that we might think is correct. So but I appreciate you asking.
I agree
but
with that. And
Yeah,
the rules are a little bit more expansive than the law, which is,
right.
I can understand that. But if you have a question, ask, and then if you're told it's okay, then it's okay.
For me, it would be okay. And just protect yourself on the liability side.
Well, I assume that somebody there will be sending me an email saying that's okay or something like that. Or there'll be a record of this where y'all vote and say, yeah, it's okay.
Steve, I'll ask you, Wanda, is that an email that you send, or what, will that suffice?
Just real quick, this is Maria. I'm legal counsel for the board. For those of you who don't know me. Anyhow, just to be clear, we don't typically, might fall under the scope of giving legal advice to a licensee. So I'm not sure that it would be appropriate to have a final board vote on this matter. Just because we know the facts of the issue on its face right now. We don't know the full scope of the issue. So it's best just to not put things in writing where we don't, have the full picture sometimes. So I'm happy to reach out and kind of, send an email on this issue if you all are comfortable with that. I just don't know if it'd be appropriate to vote, because the rules are the rules as they stand. And so, we try to be helpful as possible, but voting on something that's already in the rules is usually not appropriate.
This is Steve Maria. I was just about to call on you with the question that you just answered, and also the fact that we're as we talk, we're attempting to interpret a rule. I thought we should ask you to weigh in on it. So I guess the conclusion is that you will respond, Maria?
Yes, I'll coordinate with Wanda as well, and Michael, and kind of point out the parts of the rule that, maybe mention or do not mention a specific issue at hand. And sometimes that's helpful. But as far as official board guidance, that's not something we typically do.
Very well. Is there any other discussion on this item?
Just thanks to everybody for their comments, and thanks to Mr. Edens for coming to the board with this.
Well, I appreciate y'all looking at it, and I'll probably drop out here in just a bit. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Edens. Okay, we'll proceed on now into applications.
Mr. King, this is Michael. If I may, we have two callers that are not identified, and in the event that these two callers would like to be identified, if they have an application coming before the board or the committee at this section, would you please identify yourselves?
My name is Elizabeth Vaughn, and I may have an application coming before the committee. I was listening in to see if it was in the committee for reinstatement.
Understood. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. Okay, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
Very well. I think the first application is, and I'm not sure how to pronounce this name, Akbar Arab, and I think Ricky would like to discuss it. Ricky, you want to give us a summary?
I will. Thanks, Steve. This is a reapplication for an engineer with 43 years of experience doing civil or structural, and the reapplication form answered no. The answer was no to the question: has any of your licenses in any state ever been revoked or suspended? And the answer was no. Yet on our transmittal where we mark approved or disapproved, there was a note there that there was a suspension history. So I asked for the disciplinary information, and there was a suspension. There were a couple of complaints in the history. One in 95 about not getting a renewal notice, and an affidavit was signed, and but there was one in 89 regarding some plan stamping type activity, and there was a failure maybe to respond, and a failure to follow through on some board directives. And so there was a suspension, a 2-year suspension. The best I can tell from looking at the file is a 2-year suspension. And so that it's just a flag for me. I have a hard time just approving something when I find a direct contradiction there. And I realize the no answer sometimes might have been a mistake in entry. Maybe it was intended to be a yes. But I wanted to flag that just because I did not feel like I could just pass that on and put it in front of the board and see if everybody feels comfortable. I'm sure this engineer has the experience, but it gives everybody a chance to look at, or if they've had a chance to look at the application information and see if they're comfortable.
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. Could I make a quick comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Given the circumstances, I think at a minimum, we should require the applicant to revise and resubmit his application and address that specific issue, I want to assume that it was just a mistake, and he meant to declare that, and didn't mean to not fully disclose that. But as an alternate, and I would invite anybody's comments or alternate suggestions to this, but in addition to asking him to revise and resubmit his application, I think as a condition, given the fact that there was incorrect information on the application, I would recommend that we also ask that he take and pass the laws and rules exam.
Very well. I was going to also ask Robert to comment, since he has reviewed the application also along with Ricky.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Robert reviewed it, and Robert skipped over the part where he said no or yes. So that was my mistake for not picking up on it. I mean, my thought was as I looked at it later when we got the stuff, was that he probably had just skipped over it. You know, I didn't pick up on that line. I've done that on a couple forms myself. I think that's got a toggle or something, or you wire in that you can put in, but you know, hit the wrong button at some point in time. And he's got 44 years of experience, and yeah, the two complaints were a little bothersome to me, but with 44 years of experience, though, they were fairly, the one was very minor, and the other one was just, it didn't appear to be conclusive. So that's why I went ahead and signed it. But I think what Alton said is a wise thing, is to give him the opportunity to check that off and then take the law and rules exam. I think that's a good solution.
Okay, then Michael or Maria, do we need to entertain a motion as such to provide that correspondence back to the applicant, or is this statement adequate?
No, you'll need to have a motion with the, I guess with the decision, and then that motion will need to be seconded, and we'll vote.
Steve, this is Alton. I would like to make a motion that we ask the applicant to revise and resubmit his application, correcting that one line, and that as a condition of the review and approval process, that he be required to take and pass the laws and rules exam.
Very well. So we would need a second to that motion.
I'll second that, Steve. This is Robert.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And just to refresh my memory, as far as voting, since this deals with application, is it the 3 board members who are eligible to vote? That would be Ricky, Robert, and Rob. Am I correct on that, Michael?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay.
Michael, Robert, is that right? I thought it was just for applications, though. Is this an application? Are we approving an application or a course on an application?
Well, you're
approving the application.
That's true. It's not technically an application, but I think since it falls in the family, and I believe Maria read the rules that associate members do not have voting rights. And that, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a blanket statement, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So in this case, we'll move forward with that blanket statement enacted.
Excuse me, I have a question. This is Wanda. Would he have to actually submit a whole new application or just a statement?
Wanda, I'm okay with just a statement.
Okay, that sounds better to me.
Yeah.
Steve, I would amend my resolution to make it, instead of a revision of the entire application, a statement that it was a mistake, and in fact he has had previous whatever actions taken against him by the board. The answer should have been yes instead of no. But still, that as a condition of the approval, that he be required to take it past the laws and rules exam.
Okay, very well. Robert, is that okay with you as the seconder?
Yes, sir, it is. I accept that amendment.
Okay, Michael, and thank you for bringing that up, Robert, because I get confused about the voting situation, but we will proceed as Maria has suggested, and only the 3 members will vote. And Michael, will you do a roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Barrick.
In favor of that. Aye.
Mr. Bursey.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Very well, the motion carries 3-0, and we'll move on to the next application. Last name is Hebling, and I think actually Robert would like for the committee to view and discuss. So Robert, would you care to give us a summary?
I believe you're on mute.
Sorry, I hit my space bar and it didn't take it. Okay. This is a person that works in a CEI field at TDOT. And again, I'm trying to pull up my notes on here. Inspection, different things. I don't. I always struggle with. Well, I'd struggle with some of these because I don't know that I see progressive experience. I know there are some construction things in there that we look at, but I would just like the board to see the application and see if I've got a blind spot on this, because I always struggle with these because I don't see them actively involved in the analysis and the engineering whenever issues come up. I just see people approving pay requests and doing some other things. And that's, I don't think that's what we want licensed engineers to be doing. So only, if that makes sense.
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. Can I comment?
Sure, go ahead.
We had a case come up almost exactly like this about 1.5 years ago. I think the individual that was appealing the decision actually came personally to the board meeting. Some of y'all will probably remember. I know that Ricky was able to provide us all with information about what exactly constituted progressive experience and the roles and responsibilities that an engineer played in the development of their experience. And I remember very distinctly that Construction Administration Services, CEI services, was a component of that. It was an acceptable methodology of practice that could be attributable to acquiring the 4 years of progressive experience. Ricky, you may still have that information handy, I'm not sure. But again, as we all know, when you're a somewhat junior level person at TDOT or any other probably state or federal organization, that's generally a start-off point. A lot of them get their experience early on in their careers doing exactly what this applicant has done. I look back at her transcript. She graduated summa cum laude and went on and pursued and got her master's program. I think she made 2 B's. Everything else was A's. I think that she seems to represent everything that we would like in an applicant to join the ranks of professional engineers, and she got pretty glowing remarks in her references. Given all of those facts, it would be my orientation to recommend that she be allowed to sit for the PE.
Thanks. I was going to ask Ricky to comment also, if you don't care, Ricky, because the notes say that you approve the application, but for the fall exam.
I will. Thanks, Steve. And I'm like Robert. I know we struggle with the applicants who have been in the construction administration side for fear that we're just if all they have done is check off pay request and transfer some submittals from vendor to contractor and back and that sort of thing. So it is a struggle. But I think we have approved generally, and it's in particular it's the TDOT applicants that come to us. We because they have such a large number, we oftentimes struggle with that. But in looking at the experience with construction, I mean, I think we have approved similar experience levels in the last year. Because I mean, it is our intent that people in the construction side of things, that being a professional engineer is also an avenue where we welcome professional engineers. And when we look at what Alton was talking about, our pamphlet, I guess it's on our website, about what kind of experience you need to apply under practical application of theory. That the most weight has to go to practical application of theory, and design is the thing we're most comfortable with, but there are other things listed under practical application of theory. There's analysis, which includes value engineering, safety, environmental issues, economic issues, risk assessment, and reliability. There's testing, that is considered practical application of theory. There's implementation, specifically noted, quality control and assurance, safety issues. Again, there's system applications, and time in the engineering process, which includes scheduling and workflow. And then knowledge and understanding of codes and standards and regulations. So the practical application of theory is broader than just design calculation or design layout. And it is something that we have published on our, it's not a law or rule, but we've got it published as a guideline on our website. And so I think we have broadened a little bit in terms of these construction administration applications that come to us. But I think I try to glean out of the words, the places where there has been some analysis, where there has been some testing experience, where there has been, things other than just passing paper from one pile to the other. And I thought I saw enough of that with this application that I approved it.
Okay, Ricky, why did you specify the October 2021 exam?
Oh, good question. Because this person didn't start their work until the end of June of 2017, the way I remember it. So I felt like they didn't have their 4 years in, that they only had 3.5 years. So I approved her for the fall when she would have 4 years in.
Hey, Ricky, this is Alton. I thought, and maybe I misread this, but I thought in her transcript that she also had her master's, which we would allow 1 year of progressive experience for a master's.
Yeah, and
I could be wrong.
Right, and what I think is the case here is that master's was that she got the master's during those years of 2017 to 2020. So we had, in the past, we had discussed that and come to the conclusion that the master's really applies when, like, if you get after your bachelor's, you get a master's, then you work 3 years in addition to that year you got the master's, you could count that as 4. But if you had 3 years of experience and within that 3 years you got your master's by going to school at night, we did not, at least a couple of years ago, we decided that was not the intent. In other words, a double dip on the time, that really 4 calendar years would be needed.
I do recall some discussion like that, but I don't recall where we ended up on that. Robert, do you remember anything like that?
No, I think we just said we can't double dip, that we're not allowing people to get years credit for their master's credit as well, unless we can determine somehow that they're like working full time. They're doing 40 hours and getting their master's at night or something.
So if they,
Ricky, this is Alton again. Do we know that? I did not look at the specific date when she achieved the master's. I don't know how that relates to when she started and ended, or right now has ended her progressive experience. Do you know that? Do we know that date?
Yeah, good question. I'm looking at the application, and she's listing the master's is from 2018 to 2020, which kind of lays right on top of the 2017 to now experience.
but does it matter if the applicant was working full time and doing the master's studies in the evening?
Again, my memory is we discussed that a couple of years ago, and there was sentiment to allowing that, but I think the majority of us thought that no, and maybe that's that's the safer position. You know, I mean, I would rather have somebody have 8 years experience than 4, as far as, you know, how much time it takes to get up to speed. But anyway, I think we talked about that a couple of years ago, that we felt like even if people were going to school at night and they were working full time, we still kind of considered that double dipping. That, again, that's my memory of our discussion.
Okay, then I guess there's two issues that we would need a motion to consider. One, whether her experience as she's outlined is adequate to meet the progressive experience requirement, and also, and if so, then the date of the exam that we would be willing to approve her for if the experience is okay.
Steve, this is Alton. I'd like to make a motion that we advise the candidate to reapply for the exam based on the information that Ricky shared. I trust his memory on that more than mine, that she would be eligible to sit for the exam in October.
Excuse me, this is Wanda again. She wouldn't need to reapply. The application is open for 5 years from the date received.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that she would be eligible to sit for the exam in October.
Right. But she would need
Not
to reapply
reapply.
though. Right.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Okay, is there a second to the motion?
I guess I'm hearing that we don't necessarily need a motion if she gets approved for October. Was I hearing that right?
All I was saying is that, well, I don't know if it needs to be in the form of a motion or not. Again, sorry, this is Alton. Is that we notify her in some way. If it takes a motion to do that, that's fine. But that we notify her that, you know, based on her experience, even with the master's and the fact that her master's was gained during the progressive experience and not prior to it, that she would be eligible to sit for the exam in October. And I don't know whether that takes a motion or we can just advise Wanda to send her a notification.
Well, I think, and Michael or Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think somehow or another 2 of the members have to sign the application. So however we get there, whether it's by motion or by signatures, that would let us know how we should proceed.
I think in this case, we'd be okay with guidance as opposed to a motion, since we already have the application. It's been received and nothing needs to be done there. We could just entertain the board's guidance to notify the applicant. Because we're not changing anything.
Okay, well, we have Alton's suggestion for guidance then. So I guess it's up to the other members to weigh in on that.
Steve, this is Ricky. I submitted my form that shows I approved her for the fall of 2021. So I think we just need to see what the other 2 board members or how they want to do that, or have Robert, since he's application, say. But I'll just comment that, again, I struggle with Robert, and if Robert feels like an applicant needs more time, especially in for the candidates that are civil, and that's his field, and I'm just a mechanical engineer. I think it's always in the best interest of the public health, safety, welfare. That doesn't mean that I'm not sensitive to an applicant's rights and trying to see their way to approval. But like I said, experience is good for public health, safety, and welfare. So anyway.
Okay, Robert, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at these, I try to go through the intern sheet that we've been using, and I think somebody stated that we use a little bit more, can weight the practical application of theory, and really what I do is I kind of go through that sheet and highlight the ones that I think they've got some exposure to. I do believe that we call this progressive engineering experience for a reason. That what we are supposed to be doing for our new folks is giving them more and more challenging tasks to do. And really, I do struggle with that when it comes to some of these projects because I don't know how much more challenging. I know the Broadway Viaduct is a big project, but there's other people out there, and I know, Concord's got its issues, but again, it's a 5-lane widening project, so it's not like we're going from a simple project to a complex multiple level I mean, it's just hard for me to see progressive on all this. So I'm, like I said, I go through and I look at these, and if a bunch of them are checked off, then I approve it. If they're not, it's not. And I just couldn't see all this, but I will. Ricky looked at it and saw some value there, and again, it's kind of a blind spot with me, so I'll go ahead and approve it for the October meeting. So Wanda just send me a sheet and I'll sign off on that.
Will do.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So then I guess does that conclude our discussion for that applicant?
Yeah, plus I didn't want to put our new voting member in the tiebreaker role just yet. We'll rake him over the coals later for something else.
Well, you were very kind, Robert, because I was about to have to ask him his opinion. Okay, we'll move on to.
I'm grateful to all of you.
Rob, I remember my first board meeting, they were asking me all these questions. I hadn't even looked at the application yet, so I'm trying to save you some of that.
He'll be an expert in 2 months. Let's move on to the next application. Mr. Swaller. I'm sure that's not the proper pronunciation, but let's see. It says Ricky would like to discuss. Robert flagged it. So I guess you both want to discuss. So Ricky, you want to go first? Your name was first on the summary.
I will. Thanks, Steve. Let's see. This is, let me get this. So this is a reapplication, and this applicant was last licensed in Tennessee. I think it was not renewed in 2009, and since 2009 there have been a couple of disciplinary issues following some complaints in Kansas and Arkansas. Kansas, he was a complaint was issued by his employer about some drawings, some details on drawings. And then in Arkansas, it was a continuing education renewal issue. And Arkansas revoked his license. The Kansas discipline was being fined. And then there were some kind of piling on, it was what they call it, by other states with some discipline, and then a couple. Missouri was a probation for a year because this wasn't disclosed. The past Kansas and Arkansas disciplinary measures were not disclosed to Missouri. So anyway, it looks like I was having a little trouble just seeing where is the engineer now currently registered, and it looks like the applicant's registered in Texas and Colorado, and is being reinstated in Missouri. I was interested to see if he had wanted to get licensed again in Arkansas or Kansas, and either didn't want to or wasn't able to, one or the other. I'm not sure, but anyway, with that much of a disciplinary history, I just felt like the board ought to hear it. I didn't really feel at liberty to just say okay without at least bouncing this off the board. This is a structural engineer with it looks like a good bit of real design experience, and so I don't think there's a huge concern about somebody getting somebody who hadn't done any engineering. This person looks to have plenty of experience. I'd be happy to hear what Robert, what he has to say.
I was going to ask Robert to give us your thoughts.
What I saw was an engineer that had a tremendous resume, and who made who had an oversight on and again, we've all done that where we've not placed a detail on a drawing or looked at something. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And what he was penalized for, I understand why they did it, but I'm not sure that one error like this with his other parts of his resume make him a risk to the health, safety, and welfare of Tennessee. So I looked at the entirety of his experience and the complexity and of his projects, and if he were a real poor or incompetent or whatever the right word is engineer, I think we wouldn't see this resume. So kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt on that.
Steve, this is Ricky. I have one more comment.
Go ahead, Ricky.
I agree with you, Robert, that one detail. I mean, we probably all have had that problem somewhere, but the part that just made me pause was the reason Arkansas revoked his license was a lack of response to the board there over a period of time where when the issue came up in Arkansas, which was a continuing education issue, and then the other states, because the disciplinary issues were not evidently flagged in the way they should have. So that probably gave me a little more concern the non-response to the board in Arkansas than actually the design part of it.
And Ricky, I would agree with that. You know, there was some issue there for me a little bit, but at the same time, you know, when you start getting some of these letters and requests and from multiple states, and I've heard some of our other architects and people that are licensed in multiple states, you do sometimes get kind of overwhelmed with some of those things sometimes. And I again chalked it up to something like that. You know, but again, that's kind of why I put my comment on there that we probably need to have something in his record. I think that was my comment, that either flagged him or, you know, here's your license, but we understand, you know, you need to make sure you're a good citizen for the engineers of the state of Tennessee.
Steve, this is Ricky. Yeah, I like that, Robert. I mean, I think I could be comfortable approving if there is a way to kind of flag the file if that's possible. I don't know whether, you know, because of disciplinary history happened after he was last registered in Tennessee. You know, I don't know whether it'd be some value in taking the laws and rules test and passing it for Tennessee, just to kind of refreshing with our rules as opposed to the other states. That might be worth a consideration.
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. I was actually going to add that as a consideration, Ricky. I'm glad you said that because I agree with you, and it's in keeping with what we have done previously, even today, with somebody that has committed previous transgressions. I do think as a prerequisite to the issuance of this approval that the applicant be required to take and pass the laws and rules exam.
So, sounds like we're about to arrive at a consensus. Is this one that would require a motion, since we may want to add the law and rules exam, Michael?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was having some audio trouble.
Sure. I was just saying, it seems like we're about to arrive at a consensus on this application. But since there's the suggestion that we add the taking and passing the laws and rules exam, does that require a motion, or can that just be handled by consensus?
No, because it's an additional, let's make a motion of it.
Very well, I'd entertain a motion.
Steve, this is Alton. I'd like to make a motion that we approve this candidate for licensure with the provision that he be required to take and pass the laws and rules exam.
Do you have a second?
I'll second it.
That was Robert. So I have a motion and a second now. Any other discussion? Okay, Michael, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Barrick.
Yes.
Mr. Bursai.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Michael, can I make just a point of order? And again, I am trying to belabor the point, but I'm not meaning to be a butthole about it. But how is it that we can't have the associates vote on an application, but yet they can make a motion for that? Something doesn't line up for me, and I understand it. I'm whatever, but it just, they're either part of the process or not part of the process. And I don't see how you can make, you know, in a county commission meeting, which is what I relate stuff to, you have to be a commissioner to make a motion. You have to be a commissioner to vote on it. So I don't get that part of it. And anyway, it confuses me.
I understand, and I would again turn to Maria for our legal interpretation of the rules regarding associate members.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, Robert, I understand your confusion on this. So associate members cannot vote. That's very clear in the statute. And that's just a blanket, statement. But as far as in motion, that would have to be under Robert's Rules of Order for members who have non-voting privileges. I can look into that and update you all on what Robert's Rules of Order say, just because the statute and rules are silent. And so at that point, we would defer to Robert's Rules of Order. So I will look into that and let you know. My instinct is that probably not able to make motions, but I'll just double check and get back with you all.
Yeah, thank you. And if there's any way that we can, if we're going to go look at some stuff, I look at this as the engineering committee, which is separate from the board, and I don't know. And Maria, you're 1,000 times better lawyer than I am an engineer, so I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to figure out how we take something from a committee to a full board. There's just a disconnect in there to me, and I believe the associate members on a committee should have full voting privileges and everything, because we're taking their input and they're allowed to make motions, and it's just something that needs to be changed, because it's just extremely crazy.
I understand, and you all have brought this to my attention several times. I've looked at the statute every way that I know how. It's very clear in the statute. I don't know why the legislator wrote it that way, but it is what it is. So I can't really give you all advice contrary to what the statute says. I understand it might be frustrating. Alton has so much to offer and is a great asset to our board and this committee. I don't know why, they wrote that associate members don't have voting privileges. All I can say is that is my legal advice to you all, is that it just doesn't count under the statute.
And hear me clearly. I understand that and appreciate what you're saying. I just think it's something that needs to be addressed, however it needs to be addressed, because it doesn't make any sense. And I know the law's not always supposed to make sense, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
Absolutely. And we had landscape architect committee meeting this morning, and there is some language in the statute that we are going to submit to the department, to have the governor's office evaluate. It's never a guarantee, but if that's something that you all would like me to bring to the attention of the department, they might want to consider that. That's the only kind of recommendation that I think can be helpful at this point.
Steve, this is Ricky. I've got one more, question for Maria on this.
Go ahead, Ricky.
Maria, I know that I've probably asked you this on each of our meetings, but I wonder if kind of like what you brought up on the technology degree, if the statute says associate members don't vote, if that can be interpreted to mean at the board meeting, whereas the committee meetings, which engineer committee is one, the public outreach is one, continuing education committee. I know that when I was an associate, I voted on all those committees. I wonder if a rule was written that further clarified, like we have for the technology degree, that the associate engineering members can vote on committees. If that were added as a rule, could that work in helping to interpret the statute as applying to the board meetings only. Just a thought.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's just like in this instance, the statute, it just says that the kind of statutory intent behind associate engineer members is that they shall render technical assistance to the board and staff as authorized by the board. And then just, of course, the language of, no voting privileges. I can talk with, Stuart and Tony are both my supervisors in legal if they want to maybe provide, further insight on this for me. I can certainly bring this, to their attention and kind of get maybe a second look at it. And I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, Mr. Versio, this is Tony Glandolf. I mean, I've been listening. We're not in a position to give legal advice as to whether or not a rule could work in conjunction with that statute, because this is a very specific statute about non-voting members. This has come up before, but what we can do is we can go back and research it, and I think it's going to be more specific to Robert's Rules of Order. Looking through that, and if you all have seen that before, there's there's usually some primers on Robert's Rules of Order that are 20 pages, but the actual book is a couple hundred pages. So we'll dig into that and we'll look and we'll see. I think I understand the question, which is, maybe not the main committee meeting, but the main board meeting, but on these committee meetings, is there ability to, one, make a motion on some of these, or two, is there anything they could vote on within a committee that's not part of the actual, which is a recommendation to the board on the full issue, I think is how I understand it.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, I mean, it's very good questions that I have not thought about before.
And Anthony, glad to have you back. But yes, that's exactly right. And
Yeah.
if it's something that can be changed,
right.
Because we keep going back and forth, and what's real and not real is confusing, and we've been doing this a while. So
right. Okay, we will look into that. Thank you.
Very well. Always interesting discussion that many of us stay confused about. So I think we have a motion on the floor. Is that correct?
No, we just voted the last motion, and this conversation was a result of that passage. So I believe I think we have one more application for review, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct. You're correct. I got lost in the discussion. The next application is Brandon Wetzel. Let's see. I think Ricky approved it, and Robert wanted the committee to discuss. So, Robert, would you discuss or bring up what you want the committee to talk about?
It's another CEI thing, and I'll get there. Hold on just a second. I'm pulling down what I had, and I'm just going to read the description of the just a little bit of it. Supervise and inspect various roadway construction. Okay. Explain specific project procedures. Okay. Provide technical guidance and answer technical questions. Identify concerns, issue safety, hazard, recommend various solutions to civil engineering problems. Okay, good. Work with design department to correct plans, errors, and determine field engineering inspection for certain standards. So I see some of the stuff that I'm looking for, but my question to the applicant was that they recommend design solutions, work with designers to correct errors. I want to see their contribution to some of these solutions and see them demonstrate progressive engineering experience. So that they're moving from easier to harder solutions, right? I mean, I think that's the definition of progressive. Um, so they gave me back this. Studying traffic patterns and adjust traffic control. Okay, that's good. Laying out new and retrofit curbs to ADA standards. Well, okay. That's kind of something that a contractor does, but whatever. Here's an example. An intersection modification project last year, guard-in terminal was to be installed at the end of a new concrete retaining wall. It was on the top of an existing box culvert. When the wall was being built, I discovered the amount of soil coverage on the top of the box was not enough to install the guardrail and end treatment. I sent the designer an email. And then they go through maybe something that the designer sent and it was maybe not quite right or something. It just seems that there's not a whole lot of depth here, that there's not a whole lot of progressive. I mean, these are year one things that somebody in a construction administration, construction setting should do. And I just didn't get, it didn't give me a warm and fuzzy about them having progressive experience. So I'll be open to answer whatever questions.
Okay, Ricky, you want to give us your thoughts? Then we'll open it up to others who haven't studied this probably as much as you and Robert have.
Sure, Steve. Yeah, this is very, very similar to the last, the other one we talked about today with the construction and the TDOT, and where I mean, I'm seeing the same thing that Robert's seeing, and just making a call that's kind of what you get when you're in the construction end of things. That those are the kind of tasks you get. But again, I'm I totally respect what Robert's talking about and his knowledge of what these tasks are. But anyway, that I picked up the same things he did and just made the decision that was enough, and it was what they had available to them. But I really want to hear others' thoughts too.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to say about this particular application?
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. I sort of revert back to what I said on our second applicant, and to reiterate what Ricky said, this is the only avenue for experience that was available to this individual based on his employer. And I think Robert had mentioned a number of work products that the individual had been involved in that had some element of design or practice of theory in place. And I do understand what Robert's saying, and I don't disagree. I mean, the level of experience being gained is probably not what the same individual would have. Let's say, for example, if they were working in a private firm, but it's what was available to them at the time, and it also meets the level of standard by definition that's established on our website, as Ricky pointed out earlier. I'm like Robert. I agree that I think it would be much more beneficial to both the individual and maybe even the profession if there were a lot more actual practice of design before being allowed to sit for the PE. But there are a number of individuals who work in state and federal, and for that matter, industrial arenas that won't have that opportunity just by virtue of the fact of their training program and their progressive responsibilities inside that organization. So again, I hate to penalize somebody who wants to be a licensed professional and who, you know, graduated from a four-year accredited university and has had 4 years of, quote, experience, and who wants to sit for the PE. And again, at the end of the day, we still have the PE as a measuring stick, or a potentially in about 52% of the cases, a barrier to professional licensure. So again, I go back to exactly the same situation we had with the second applicant today. It's not really their fault. It's just a function of the services they're allowed to provide as part of their training in the organization that they're employed by. And again, while I strongly agree with Robert, our own criteria allow those construction engineering services to be considered as progressive experience. So my tendency would be to allow the individual to sit for the exam, even though I am a non-voting member. So thank you, Steve. I appreciate it. I look forward to everybody else's thoughts.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, go ahead, Ricky.
Okay, yeah, that was good comments, Alton. And I want to clarify, make sure that I'm not saying just that any experience would do it. And Alton is not saying that either. If somebody were stuck in some storage room handing out safety vests and just doing inventory on earplugs, that doesn't qualify. And I have turned down applications where I couldn't even glean any engineering knowledge being used, construction, be it construction or design. But so I just wanted to clarify that I don't think we're saying that just any experience will do it. Like Robert, I'm looking at that same sheet he is, trying to pick out the things on that sheet. So we're trying to do the same thing there.
Yeah, Steve, this is Robert again. And I'm with what Alton said, and I think I understood what he said too, is that, you know, your employer, this license is your license. It's not your employer's license. It's not something else. And I think, and I've had this discussion with people at TDOT. I've had this discussion, Steve, with people in your organization at City of Knoxville. On some level, it's up to the individual to go seek out those opportunities, which make them improve the level of what they're able to do, improve themselves, and challenge themselves to do different things. And just because you're in a work environment doesn't preclude you from seeking out those opportunities and having those discussions. And, you know, an organization as large as TDOT can certainly move people around for periods of time to gain some of that experience. And so I don't use that as an excuse for that. I strictly, when I looked at this individual and I looked at time in the engineering process, difficulties of workflow, I didn't see it. Evaluation, I just don't see things getting more difficult, managing more people, managing more assets, supervising, coming up with your own schedules, assessing risk. I just don't see that getting progressively harder during that 4-year period. And that's why I was not in favor of this.
Hey, Robert, this is Alton. and I know that we've done this before. We had another similar situation to this, and we asked the applicant to give us more detailed description that better defined that, you know, that progressive growth and in responsibility and even team management or whatever, and to maybe elaborate a little more on some of the specifics of those services that they were providing. Is this a case where you might feel more comfortable if we gave the applicant an opportunity to sort of expound a little more on what they've included in their progressive experience and give more and more detailed and better examples of both how they used engineering, how they used their background and knowledge as an engineer to perform those services, and whether or not they were given progressively more responsibility?
Alton, I don't know if I may not have been clear on the, but what I read from you at the second part was where I had asked them for more information. And they basically, and their thing was that they discovered that the guardrail post didn't have enough cover over the top of a culvert. And the entrance to business was located close to a signalized intersection. I noticed here's the quote. During construction, I noticed traffic was queuing up in the intersection directly across from the entrance mentioned above. I proposed installing a centerline barrier system. So that sounds good, but you know, I gave them that opportunity, and what they came back with to me was pretty weak. And let me give you an example, and I don't mean to manipulate this, but if they noticed that traffic was backing up, what I would like for them to say was, you know what, I got out the manual and uniform traffic control. I got out some of my traffic control books. I came up with a solution that said, hey, here's a possible look at this, and I've analyzed this a little bit to see, I think this will work. And then go back to your traffic engineering folks and say, here's something I came up with. It looks like it's going to work. I use this standard or that standard. I don't see stuff like that, and that just frustrates me because they've got the ability to use those resources to propose solutions like anybody else does. So I did give them an opportunity, though, and that's what they came back with.
Yeah, I did see that, Robert, and I read it. So I think where we are on this one, it seems like we're headed toward a suggestion that this applicant gain more progressive experience. I guess Robert and Ricky, do you think that's where we are?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Comfortable. If Robert, I don't know if you can suggest something, or what it would take more, like a telephone call with the applicant, or whether you think waiting a period of time would probably do it.
Hey, Ricky, this is Alton, and Robert, I hate to preempt what you're about to say, and I want to hear your comment to that, but I think if we don't give him a little more specific, detailed information about what the expectation is, my guess is he may come back with other similar projects. And I agree with Robert that if he doesn't go ask the people who give him work assignments, hey, listen, I need more to do than just these types of things. I need something that demonstrates I'm growing my engineering skills and responsibilities and performing more design-like functions. Then it's going to be difficult for me to achieve this PE. So I think we probably do need to give the individual, the applicant, a little more specific information so that they don't have to come back and go through this exercise again, where we send it back and ask for more information. And I look forward to hearing what Robert has to say.
Here's a suggestion then. I think I know his supervisor, and I know the person that's their supervisor. If it's okay, I probably just ought to sit down with them or talk to their supervisor a little bit, and maybe the applicant, and try to direct them a little bit more, because I am sympathetic. I mean, we all get busy and we all get kind of in a groove, and it's hard to go do things, but at the same time, this is a person that if they pass their PE can go out and be designing whatever, and that's not, just because is not a reason to allow them down the path. So, if it's okay with everybody, I mean, I think I will reach out to the people over these departments here in the region and see if we can't steer them a little bit better.
Keith, I think that's a good idea, Robert, and appreciate you making that offer, but I just want to make sure, Michael, that that's okay.
This is Rob. This may be more of a question than a comment. But I'm a registered mechanical engineer. I know a lot about boilers and chillers and stuff like that. I may not know a hell of a lot about internal combustion engines. And I think there's something in the code that says you won't practice outside of your area of expertise. Civil engineering is broad. Just because I'm a civil engineer doesn't necessarily mean I can design bridges. Maybe I can move dirt. And our license doesn't seem to distinguish what you are capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing. It seems like we leave that protection of the public welfare up to the good instincts of the individual to not do something that he wasn't or she wasn't qualified to do. So I guess I'm asking, how do you all deal with that? I mean, for example, this applicant could be somebody that's done nothing but sit in a drawing board and design bridges. But that might not mean they know anything about traffic control or something else. Us giving them a license doesn't really give them. I'm just saying. I'm saying this in the form of a question. Us saying you can be licensed doesn't give them permission to practice outside of their area of expertise, does it?
Rob, let me answer that. It doesn't give them permission, but it gives them the ability to. So, since we define our own limits.
Well, what I'm going to tell you is that everybody that we've licensed, including me and you, is licensed to do something that's outside of our. We have the ability with our license to go someplace that we don't have any business going.
I would agree with you 100%.
So how do we are we as a board expected to govern what is either good common sense or ethics of an individual? Because we've all got licenses that would allow us to go someplace where we shouldn't be holding ourselves out as qualified to go.
And the answer is yes. And we've had some of those situations where we see somebody with no experience in a civil designing a HVAC system, for instance, and they've stamped those plans, and you ask the question and say,
and we bust their chops.
Yeah. And we question them on that. We do have the ability to bring them in and question them and put them through that process.
Well, I'm maybe thinking out loud about this. as a novice and a newcomer to this board, but I mean, I guess a question I would ask you. So, in this guy's role with TDOT, what of the 300 things that a civil engineer can do are you going to suggest that he gets some experience with?
I'm going to ask in the stuff that he's doing right now, the tasks that he's asking, that he gets experience, progressive experience in those. And my comment was, if he's doing construction inspection, they're just like this thing with the turning lane, so that he noticed it. He had the ability to develop his own solution to that and get that approved, rather than just raising his hand saying, "Hey, here's a problem. Let's go see if somebody can go fix this." I'm not asking him to go design a bridge. I'm just asking him to show some experience within the area that he's in.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a quandary, because he's not in a job where he is expected to design really anything.
True. However, they called him. They give them the title of construction engineer, and they do the original part of that was that they are supposed to be part of that design process.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too. I may be going back to things that are long since worn out and gone, but the title of engineer, I thought was not supposed to be used by somebody that wasn't a registered engineer. And yet TDOT seems to bestow that title on people that are not. Now that'll start some trouble, won't it? Maybe it's time for me to mute.
No, and there's an answer to that. And I don't mean to just have this mean you, but the answer is, as long as it's something that's internal, that's not put out for public consumption, that title is you can use it. But if you're starting to promote that title to the public, so if this person right here would come up to somebody and say, "Well, I'm a construction engineer," without being licensed, he would be in violation. But if they're just using it as an internal term, it's allowed.
All right, that's a rabbit hole. We won't go down that one. But
Steve, this is Ricky. I will add, Rob, that your observation is right on, and it's not only the construction end where we struggle with this, but we get a lot of industrial, people in industrial settings it's a similar deal. People in sales, professors, who we all would like to see them gaining a PE license for the sake of the public, but their experience level is different, and it wouldn't qualify them to go doing everything. But it's like you said, all of us have our limits, so that's a good reminder. It applies that limitation to personal discretion of what you know to do is going to apply to every single PE. And it's good to remember.
Well, thank you all for educating me a little bit about that.
This is Steve. Rob, you just described in a nutshell what we all go through when we look at these things, and we all look at it a little bit differently, but it is much more difficult, I think, for a young engineering graduate to show progressive engineering experience in fields and disciplines other than those that are pure design. And that's what I think that's what Robert's struggling with. And, Robert and I have had discussions about, I work for the city of Knoxville, about engineers who review rather than design. And we've had some healthy discussions about those kind of things through the years.
Steve,
Go ahead, Ricky.
you asked for input about Robert's offer to make the phone call, and I like it because I think you can tell a lot talking to somebody that you might take a lot of swipes at trying to get from them and some written treatment like we have. When I first joined the board at the engineer committee meetings, we used to call applicants that we had any doubts about. And that seemed to clear up a lot pretty well. It worked when we were all meeting in person pretty well. I don't know how well it would work on a Zoom call. But it was anyway, what Robert is suggesting is a form of that, and I like it.
Okay, I think I had asked staff, I guess Michael, if what Robert suggested is permissible.
Yes, I'm going to have to. There's been a little bit of conversation in between there. I'm going to have to get the question repeated.
Okay, I think Robert offered to contact this applicant's chain of supervision and discuss the applicant's responsibilities, maybe even meet with the applicant, since Robert says he's familiar with the organization and some of the supervisors, to help this applicant gain more progressive experience to meet our requirements.
This would be new territory for me. I would like to actually ask Wanda if anything like this has ever happened in the past. And then I'd follow up with Maria and ask if board members are allowed to do that. Because I don't know the answer.
Yeah, we've had board members to correspond with applicants before.
Okay. Maria, I assume that means we won't be breaking any rules.
This one caught me off guard, Michael. I'm sorry. I need to check on that because it does raise a flag to me. But I'll have to look and let you know if that's okay.
Well, okay. So in the meantime, how about we proceed with Robert? Why don't you and Wanda? Why don't you correspond with Wanda and let Wanda lead point on this until we get an opinion from Maria regarding the question.
Okay, yeah, it's no problem. I'll just wait for Maria's answer because, I mean, the applicant's already provided me what I asked them for, and it didn't get where I want them to go. So I'll just wait for Maria to.
Hey, and Steve, this is Alton. Can I ask Michael a question?
Sure.
Hey, Michael, I would ask that Wanda share that with all of us, because if it's an option available to us to make that call, that would make things a lot easier. I suspect with some of the reviewers. Or, I'm sorry, ask Maria to share that information with all of us.
Sure. Once Maria comes back with an interpretation, then I'll definitely share that with everybody.
Okay, everyone.
Thank you.
So as long as it's not two or more members together communicating with the applicant, then it's okay for the individual member to be communicating. I just wanted to double check on that, you know.
Yeah, so this is Tony. I can clarify because this has come up before, and what Maria said is correct, that a single member can talk to anyone in the public so long as that information is not with another member. Two or more members together talking board business is a meeting that has to be done in the sun as part of the sunshine laws. An individual member could reach out to an applicant to gather more information for a better evaluation of criteria and may speed things up, is not a violation of the sunshine laws. And so long as that member is not emailing their, this is what I found out, to other members, that would be a meeting. It's a communication. So emails between members outside of board business, outside of a board meeting, discussing like board business is actually a meeting and is prohibited. So applicants is generally not, there's nothing that I know of that prohibits a board member contacting an applicant when they're doing an evaluation. The only thing that I would say is slightly similar that we run across, but in a different context, is that there is a prohibition under our complaints processing that members of boards do not talk to potential complainants about their complaints, and that's handled through the process that we have. So I can add that for clarification.
Okay, so we have some direction on how we're going to handle this applicant. So is that sufficient? We're ready to move on, Michael?
I'm good if you are. We can move on.
Do we need a motion?
So the question at hand would be whether or not Robert could contact this individual to discuss the application with them.
I thought the question was whether or not this individual is approved or not.
I'm sorry, that's the overall question. I'm sorry, I was summarizing what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So there would need to be a motion for an approval, yes.
Robert, you want to make a motion? You want me to, based on what I think I know we're going to do?
Well, are we making a motion for approval of the application or a motion to approve me to go do it?
I think we're making a motion to defer approval of the application pending you having a conversation with the applicant and perhaps their supervisor, which I think you now have permission to do.
Okay. That sounds like a good motion to me, Rob. I'll second it.
Well, let's go with that then.
Yeah, that sounds like a good motion to me.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Michael, would you conduct a roll call vote and we will move on?
Yes, sir. Mr. Barrick.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bursai.
Yes.
Mr. Campbell.
Yes.
Motion's approved.
Very well. We may have set a record on taking that 2 hours to go through that, but okay, now let's move on. I think we're ready to move on to engineering technology discussion.
Does everybody have 2 more hours? I'm kidding.
Hey, this is Al. Steve, can I just bring something up real quickly? Because Rob hasn't been privy to any of these conversations. And Michael, can we have you sort of bring him up to date on what we're talking about and why we're considering this? And maybe if Casey's there, I'd also ask Casey to add her knowledge and information about this.
Allison, thank you. But I met with Michael Monday, and he gave me a little primer on this issue. So maybe I can catch up without holding you all up.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And thank you, Michael, for doing that.
Not a problem.
Alton, I'm still here, but I'm going to be quiet until told not to be.
Okay, well, let me remind us all where I think we are. We met 2 weeks ago and talked with 2 deans and another engineering school representative having experience with some with technology graduates and some with both technology graduates and engineering graduates. And so we got some information there, but I think what we had hoped to do today was to come back with an idea or a suggestion about what parameters we might agree upon that would be a pathway to licensure for 4-year technology graduates. Is that what the rest of you recall?
Yes.
Steve, that's what I recall. This is Alton.
Same here, Steve.
And I think we heard and have sort of tossed around potentially additional education and or experience beyond that accredited technology degree. So I think we're to the point now of beginning to get specific about exactly what that might look like.
Steve, this is Alton again, and I'd like to, in the interest of moving this forward, I'd like to at least make a recommendation so that we can consider it and enter alternative recommendations or discuss this in more detail. But based on the reviews that I've done, and I've tried to prepare my own little spreadsheet for what all the other states are doing, and based on our conversations with the representatives from the ETAC schools last time, and based on the information that Dr. Smith provided us about the difference in the education between an EAC accredited university and an ETAC accreditation or a curriculum, I think that there are 2 components that are missing. One is the additional education, and one may be more specific experience. And what I've seen and I've noticed is one thing that I like that some of the states have done is they require some element of both. Notion that to overcome or help overcome the deficiency in the curriculum, that we require any ETAC accredited university graduate to achieve a master's from an ABET EAC accredited university and have 6 years of progressive experience after achieving that master's.
Very well, Alton. I'd be interested in hearing what other committee members think.
Can you say that one more time? It was 6 years, and what was the first part? Something messed up on me.
They would have to have a master's degree from a university that has an ABET EAC accredited undergraduate program, a master's in engineering from that university, and 6 years of experience.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, Ricky.
I was thinking along the same lines as Alton and what we were seeing from other states, and I like that kind of double approach there, more experience and more education. So I had the same master's requirement that Alton did, and I was at 8 years experience.
Okay.
Gentlemen, this is Michael. If I could add just real quick, you all had asked me to reach out to a couple of different states, and this one, you guys are on the path of Virginia right now, which I believe is probably one of the oldest accepting states in the country. The lady I talked to there went all the way back to 1980 looking at statutes for this. And they just as a point of reference, they allow undergraduate engineering technology degrees from ABET accredited programs at 6 years, and they take off 1 year of required experience for a graduate degree. And that's just to give you kind of a bearing point, a marker, so to speak. That's all I have.
Again, I go back and reiterate one of the to me one of the items that I think merits most consideration is that these are not equivalent degrees, and according to Dr. Smith, there is a difference of some margin, and that's why I think the addition of a master's from a university that has offers an undergraduate degree that's EAC ABET accredited is critical. I think that helps us overcome some of that differential in the education requirement. And oftentimes, according to what the deans were saying about the students that they placed into the workforce, a lot of them went into industry. And as we know from previous experience, those individuals in industry struggle to get design-based experience. So that's why I wanted to extend the experience component out. And again, I don't disagree with Ricky. I mean, I could be more comfortable with 8 than my recommendation of 6, but I was trying to find a happy medium based on what the other states that have this in place already, this alternative path to licensure in place already, are allowing and requiring. So I think the requirement associated with the masters, as I've mentioned, and the additional experience, whether it be 6 years or 8 years or whatever we determine, I think that helps overcome some of the concerns that both Dr. Smith had and that we know already they're predicated on the experience that most people that go into industry have in achieving that same level of progressive experience as someone who graduates and goes into a normal engineering function, engineering role, depending whatever the organization they go into is.
Hey, Alton, it's Robert. And both you and Ricky, I'm not necessarily, I am agreeing with the premise. I think we have the deep part of it. One of those details is the FE. Do they still have to pass the FE with 8 years experience in a master's?
I think Robert, my opinion is the answer to that has to be yes. They have to take and pass the FE, achieve those educational and experience requirements before they're allowed to sit for the PE. So yes, I'm sorry I didn't mention that. I thought that was sort of preordained.
Well, but you understand the reason I asked the question is because we do have a caveat in our thing that allows somebody that has not passed the PE to take the FE to take the PE after 12 years. So
no, I fully agree with you, and I think that's an important distinction. And I appreciate you making that. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Steve,
Yes, Ricky.
the other thing that I didn't say is I think that we ought to start with defining the technology degree as an ABET accredited ETAC degree. I can't remember if, I don't think I said that, and I don't remember Alton saying it, but from what we heard from the educators, there can be quite a difference between technology programs across the country. And I think that is something that just a detail that we need to, as we move forward with this, that I think I would be most comfortable with using that distinction as a basis for the technology.
I don't recall whether Alton said it or not, but I wrote it in my notes when he was talking. So I wrote down ETAC degree plus a master's from a school with an accredited bachelor's program plus 6 or 8 years experience.
Yeah, Steve, thank you. I think I did say that, and if I didn't, I meant to. So thank you.
Okay, we're together on that.
This is Rob. Somebody mentioned the 12-year rule, no fundamentals exam PE. Does that still exist? Because that was around when I came into the business in the 70s.
It's still there.
Okay, I did not realize that.
Well, is there any other discussion, or is that sort of where we think the committee is at this point?
Hey, Steve, this is Alton, and I hope Casey is still on the line. Casey, do you, and again, Michael, I hope it doesn't violate any protocols, but I'd like to ask Casey's opinion on that.
I'm here.
If it's appropriate.
What would you like to know, sir?
Were you not paying attention?
I was. You want to know if I think what you're saying makes sense?
Well, I guess maybe more than anything else, I know that our community, our profession is going to question this. Why are you allowing this?
Well,
you know the answer to that. And we're going to be put in a position where we have to explain it. So, but I'd like your opinion about whether or not this would help. I don't know, not soften the blow, so to speak, but maybe that is what I mean.
I do know what you're asking, and Alton, what we talked about at the last meeting, and I feel like for the last year or 2 or 3 that we've been talking about this, is what we've asked you all to, or what. I don't know if we asked or if y'all came up with, or however we came to that decision that none of us can ever remember, is we've been looking for y'all to come up with a plan, a recommendation to then go back. I've got a small group of interested parties that represent both ACEC and TSP, which are the 2 groups I represent, but also the 7 technical societies, engineering technical society / associations, that we would, I think I've made the commitment to you, and I believe it's on the record somewhere, that I am happy to convene a group of representatives from all of those folks to sort of walk them through whatever your recommendation may be, and then and also to communicate it with all of those groups, because I think, I think I'm happy to put together some reasoning behind it, and I think we have it. And I think the fact that y'all are this is a very educated, well thought decision, whatever the final decision is, y'all have certainly put the time in it. Sorry, there's a huge truck going by. Y'all have certainly put the time in it and done the research and compared others. And I think that that's really all anybody was looking for. So yeah, I mean, I think whatever you decide in the end, I'm happy to convene those groups and talk about it with those different associations as you like. But I will support whatever you say.
Steve, this is Alton. Would you mind if I make one other comment?
Go ahead.
Michael, one thing, and Casey, you may not think this would be any help at all, but if it would help to have a board member at some of these discussions, I think depending on what part of the state you're in, any of us would probably be more than willing to be there to help address this issue or answer any questions and explain, help you explain, although you rarely need any help explaining anything, but at least be there for discussion purposes when you present this information. But I would ask Michael if in fact that again doesn't violate any protocols.
Not that I'm aware of. If a board member is invited to, if you're invited as a board member and not just Alton Heathcote engineer, as you know, you're well within a protocol to go be a representative of the board.
Also, Alton, I'll say just for our cover, over time, anytime that we think we might ask you all to come talk representing the board, I typically will ask that question in my, when I give an update tomorrow at the board meeting. I will go on the record and ask for you all to consider that at the end of the meeting or whenever it's appropriate, new business, et cetera, just to get the board approval so that it's in the minutes that any of you are approved to come and be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. I think that would be important, and I think I would also, and Michael, thank you for your comments. I want to make sure from our legal team that also doesn't violate any rules or regulations that we have to, or guidelines that we have to comply with, just for validation and verification. But I do think it would be important as board members that we at least offer to be part of these discussions and among our professional organizations to maybe help explain things, the history of all of this and how we arrived at what we arrived at. Go ahead, Casey.
I was just say, frankly, Alton, I think that we, given that opportunity, I think we maybe would even do it a little bit differently and could even host like a town hall of sorts, where it's a presentation of that recommendation, if you will. But perhaps for the sake of compliance with law compliance, then perhaps tomorrow what we asked, or my ask, I guess, of the board to make the decision at the end, to sort of open it up to, we will have a meeting and not really necessarily call it a working group versus an open forum versus whatever else it could turn into, so that it gives us some leeway. Just the basis of the ask is we're going to have a conversation with a greater engineering community to get some feedback on this, and we would like any or all of the board members to be allowed to participate.
Thank you, Casey. I think that would be really, really helpful, and I would like to ensure that we have authorization to do that, and thank you for offering that.
Alton, first things first, there needs to be a recommendation that comes from this committee, which you all understand, and then this committee will need to vote it out, and then it will go to the full board with the recommendation of the committee. It will be voted out of there, and at which point in time we would make the proposed statutory changes with the legislative body, and Maria would take over that portion of it. So it could be some time before we're ready to actually have something in writing up for review, but we'll need to go through that process first before we start planning any meetings to discuss this.
Michael, it's Casey again, and I don't know if I have permission to talk, but I'm going to anyway until someone just cuts my mic off. I think what we're talking about in terms of getting having that meeting with the greater engineering community is figuring out if we are going, if the recommendation is way in the wrong direction prior to sending it up to legal. Because y'all can't, my understanding is you can't, it's too late in the game to get something in the governor's package. You know, the bill filing deadline for the Senate is next week, et cetera. So it's not going this year for any legislative change. But if we go ahead and have some of those meetings, at least the details can, you know, if there's something that's you know, way off base or going to be like a huge nightmare, or maybe somebody has a better idea that what they're leaving with tomorrow. My understanding was we were going to vet the engineering committee's recommendations prior to sending something to up the legal chain within the government process.
Yeah,
But
Michael, this is Alfred again. That was exactly what, Casey, you articulated exactly what I think the rest of us were thinking. You know, before we ask, I mean, this may be put in the form of a motion and a recommendation, but before we ask that it go before the state legislature, we would like it vetted among our professional organizations.
This is Steve. I think Maria has already advised us that this will be a rule change, not a change to the law.
That is correct. This is a rule change, not a statutory change.
So I think still the suggestion, I think, is still the same by Casey and.
Well, so what happens with that? Sorry to interrupt you, sir. But what happens with that, as you all are aware, we have the public comment section, or the public comment period once a rule change has been proposed, as it leads to a rulemaking hearing.
Right. And I think, Michael, what we are suggesting is that we have some informal discussions with some of our licensees that Casey could pull together prior to that. So I guess maybe that's a question for Maria or you to make sure that's permissible. But I think that's what the committee would like to do.
Hey, Steve.
I see that as part of the public comment portion of the process, there'd be ample time to have those discussions. Yes.
Hey, Michael, this is Alton, and I'm sorry, Steve. May I ask Michael a question or make a comment?
Sure, go ahead, and then I think Ricky wanted to be recognized right after you.
Okay, and thank you for that. Michael, normally before any open public comment period, there's a presentation of the information. I've done probably hundreds of public hearings in my life, in my career, and each and every time it's us going and presenting information to the public. And in this case, we consider the public our profession, members of our profession, so that they have access to the information they need to even comment on it in public. And I think that's what we were trying to do. It, just like Steve said, just like Casey offered, is, you know, when we propose this as a rule change, you know, we want to go ahead and get out in the community and specifics about what we're proposing and why, how it's evolved to this, so that if there is public comment, you know, they'll have the information that they need to comment on, have a thought. And there may come back, like there is in any comment period, an alternate idea or alternate concept or methodology that somebody offers that we think, well, you know what, that's a really great idea that we may want to incorporate into the rule change. after the public comment has been heard.
I
And
see no
thank you
problem
for
with
the
that.
comment.
Not a problem, Alton. I see no problem with that. I fully expect there to be need for presentation of the material.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I yield the floor to Ricky.
Okay, thanks, Alton. And I think what I'm hearing is that we think it's a little premature to go ahead and write a rule and present it in a rulemaking hearing or present it to the public. That listening to everyone, what I was thinking the order would be that after this meeting, one of us takes a stab at not writing it in rule language necessarily, but writing the basics of what we're talking about, kind of like the charts we looked at for the other 50 states, just that what in plain language, what how you could have a technology degree and qualify for registration. Just write it in very plain language, bring that back, either email it to everybody between meetings or bring it back in April. See if that is what we're all thinking. Let Maria look at it, see if there's a legal problem in going in that direction. Then we go talk with the groups through meetings that Casey sets up, not as a fully baked, product, but as something that's moving in that direction. Get input, and then it goes after that input. Then perhaps it moves into the rulemaking process and public hearing. That's kind of what I heard is where we were pushing.
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. Can I address Ricky's comment?
Sure.
And I agree with what you're saying, Ricky. And here's the things that I think that we probably need to do to get to that point. One is I'd be glad to write that down, and again in language that probably all of us could understand it, and that Maria would just butcher when she got it to put it into the correct format. But what I think we need to do in advance of that is come to a consensus about. It seems like I haven't heard from everybody, but it seems like there may be a consensus that we need to overcome. We need something to be able to overcome the differential in the curriculums, which I think the masters, the things that I noted about the master's program would hopefully help overcome that. The other outstanding question is how much additional experience are we comfortable with? I mentioned 6 years, you mentioned 8 years. I think we need to come to a consensus about that so I can draft whatever language we need and get it back to Michael so he can disseminate it out to everybody for their review and comment. So I'd like to hear from all of the board members, the committee members, about their opinions on that. Thank you, Steve.
Hey, the committee members want to weigh in on the suggestion of, I guess, that we have right now, ETAC degree plus a master's plus 6 or 8 years experience.
Just for clarification, Steve, that master's has to come from a school that has an ABET EAC accredited undergraduate engineering program.
Right.
Steve, when you say all the board members that haven't been heard from, am I it?
Oh, I'm just trying to give everybody an opportunity. If you feel like you're ready to speak, we're ready to listen, Rob.
Yeah, I think I mean, I understand y'all been wrestling with this for a while, but I like the idea that exactly what's been put down. You got to take the fundamentals. You got to take the PE. You've got to have 6 years of experience. And you got to get the master's degree from a school that has an ABET accredited undergraduate program. The only thing that I heard that I would disagree with is when that experience has to take place. I'm not sure after the master's degree really is relevant. Their experience before the master's degree might be just as relevant as anything they do after that. And I'd be good to write it down in a draft form and get it to Casey and let folks wear it out for a while.
Gentlemen, anything that is proposed needs to be voted out of committee and the full board before it's taken to presentations.
This is Robert. I'm generally in favor with what we've been talking about. It's I come down on 8 years because I don't know the answer to this question. When does a person become set, if that's the right word, in their career path? Because one of the reasons we're doing the masters, and one of the reasons as we talk to people, is part of the Bachelor of Science degree undergraduate is it gives you a pretty good exposure to a lot of different subject areas that kind of help you answer the question of, I shouldn't be dabbling in this arena over here because I remember I didn't really understand it when I was in school. The technology degree tends to be more focused in a particular field or particular area that doesn't give you all that exposure. So again, I don't have any answers. I just lean more towards 8 years. I also think that the experience, we just need to be consistent. I mean, we're asking our people with BS degrees, excuse me, to have 4 years experience after the qualifying degree. And are we calling the technology degree the qualifying degree or the master's degree the qualifying degree? And I mean, I think we need, if I'm looking at it just strictly from consistency and, you know, where you're going to get people that are going to say, well, wait just a minute, you've allowed this person to get all their experience after the technology degree, and that's not really the qualifying degree, then I think we'll have some issues. So, I mean, that my thought is we are really kind of de facto calling the master's degree the qualifying degree, and that experience needs to be earned after that. Although I agree there's other experience that's positive, but it may not be as consistent from everybody's eyes. So that's my 2 cents. Well, I mean, you know, I agree with Rob. Well, whatever we put in there, look, everybody will kind of fire at will on it and see what comes. But that's where I would come down.
Hey, Steve.
Yes, Ricky.
Just to kind of support what Robert just said, what the deans told us in the phone call and what we've heard before is technology degrees are really intended to prepare people for operating equipment and machinery and systems, whereas the engineering is designing and theorizing, which is different from operating. And a reason to have the experience follow the masters could be, this for consideration, is the kind of job you would get right after getting your technology degree might be more on an operator level. And so that experience is not as valuable for an engineering registration. Whereas somebody who gets a technology degree and then gets a master's degree would probably be more likely to go into a job that has more engineering tasks. And that's the kind of experience that I think we're looking for. So that's just a thought about trying to decide where the experience should land.
Yeah, I'm speaking from a personal experience of a guy that had a technology degree in Pennsylvania. Came to work for us designing electrical systems. 3 years into it, he was able to get registration in some states, but not in Tennessee and 11 others where ABET accredited degrees were required. Tennessee told him to go back and get a master's degree, which he did. And then I got involved with the board because after he got his master's degree, they changed their mind about whether they would register him or not. And I guess the issue there is back to the experience thing that Robert was talking about. You know, if a guy gets out of school and goes to work as designing under an engineer's supervision, and he does that for 5 years, and then he goes back and gets a master's degree, to disallow that when it's directly related to the field that he's getting registered in seems a little punitive.
I guess that's the problem with when you make a rule. You know, you're making a rule that you're trying to apply to multiple situations. But one thing I learned from the deans was oftentimes the ETAC degrees are in just general engineering technology. They're not necessarily, some are, but they're not necessarily discipline specific.
Right.
So some of the experience might not be as robust as as your former employee, Rob. So, you know, I guess the struggle is how do we make sure that the experience is appropriate in all situations, and I guess that's the struggle.
Yeah. Well, engineering technology degree takes all different forms and shapes depending where you go, and so does experience, which makes it hard to make one rule to cover it all.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah. Hello.
Was that you, Alden?
Accredited schools. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you hear me okay?
He broke up
can
there.
Sorry, I just switched off of Bluetooth. I apologize for that. Yeah, we found out that the programs aren't the same, and that's why the requirement that it be from an ETAC accredited program, because there are other engineering technology programs that are not ETAC accredited.
It gets somewhat confusing. I think it was Robert that was talking about the qualifying degree. I don't know if it could be written into the rule where the board had some discretion for the experience before the qualifying degree or not, or if that's something we would want to entertain. But it is hard to make a rule that's covers all situations.
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. I seem to recall in the past that we've had something similar to this that came up where we gave a maximum credit, but for exactly what Rob was talking about. we gave a maximum credit of X number of years for people that had achieved their ETAC degree and had then, let's say, for example, they'd worked for 6 years. They found out that this might be available to them. Then they went and got their master's. Would we require them to have 6 years of progressive experience after that and not give them any credit for the 6 years that they had worked before that? And I think there was at one point in time, there was some allowance for granting a year or 2 or 3 or whatever it was, experience for anything that was, for experience that was achieved prior to receiving the degree. I don't remember the circumstances, but I do remember that it was, that there was something in our rules about that.
I think I remember what you're talking about, and it was a consulting firm here in Knoxville that actually came to a board retreat that we held at Vanderbilt, and the issue was giving a applicant credit for some experience. I think it was up to 1 year before the qualifying degree, because it was equated to a co-op program, but it wasn't a university sanctioned co-op program.
Steve,
you may be right, but I thought it was related to that period of time where somebody who had achieved a degree from a university that had previously been non-accredited but had become accredited after they had graduated. And I think we were giving them 2 years credit towards their, it was either a year or 2 years credit towards their experience. I think, again, I wished I could remember all of the rules about that, but that was, that rule sunsetted some years ago.
hey, Steve.
Yes, Ricky.
What I'm remembering, you're right about that meeting at Vanderbilt, it was a person who, like Rob's talking about, he was working full time for Harold Cannon.
That's right.
As an adult, and going to school at night, and worked probably 8 or 10 years doing design work. And then by the time they got their degree, after a year or two, Harold's plea was, can we make an exception here? This person's been doing design for 8 years. And what we said was, we ended up saying we can give some credit for full-time work of that type before a degree that would be no more than, somehow it's worded, and it became.
It was a year.
It
was a year for 3 years, but we only got to do that one time.
Correct.
And the rationale was because the co-op programs had kind of fallen by the wayside, that a lot of schools didn't have formal co-op programs anymore, and this was a kind of a co-op. I just had the situation recently with an applicant.
That was it, exactly, a year for 3 years. And so, but that is interesting in this case. I mean, it could be something we could consider. I mean, maybe we don't want to get too complicated with it, but where you could get a couple of years if experience before the master's 2 of the 6 or something like that could be counted before a master's degree, or, I mean, that might be something we consider.
Well, what about if we left the master's as the qualifying degree, but the rule gave the board some flexibility on a case-by-case basis, with some language that Maria could help us come up with, I'm sure, where we had the flexibility to give credit for some experience prior to that degree.
Hey, Steve, when it's time, I'd like to maybe take this in a little different direction, just based on some other stuff the dean said, but I don't know if we finished this part of the discussion yet.
Well, if it pertains to trying to get us to a consensus, Robert, I think you might as well jump on in.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to. So one of the things the dean said, and several of them, was that, obviously in order to get the master's degree, many of the people with technology degrees had to make up classes. And make sure I'm not misremembering this.
I think it was almost always they had to do that, Robert.
Okay. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, now you've got to go make up classes, and you have to get a master's degree. And you have to do, so why don't we just say, if you want to get an engineering degree, we'll get your technology degree evaluated, and whatever classes you have to make up to get a Bachelor of Science degree or equivalent, go do that. Then we'll just then you pass the FE, you pass the PE, and obviously we'll have the discussion on experience. But why force them to get a master's degree on top of making up these classes? That I just don't know what the master's degree.
I think that's because it's a lot easier to get a master's degree at night. Of course, that's old news now with COVID. Everybody's at home doing it online. But I think I know in the cases I've dealt with, getting a master's degree was a lot easier than trying to fix an engineering technology degree and turn it into a Bachelor of Science.
Well, but Rob, what you said, it made some sense, right? I mean, we've seen this. There are all technology degrees are not created equal.
That's right.
And some technology, and so why are we forcing those people that have almost a Bachelor of Science to go through a master's program when they?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, if they could fix it with fewer hours, they obviously ought to be allowed to. I don't know that they would have. I don't know that they would have any. I don't know that would require any rule changes to do that. If they could turn their technology degree into a Bachelor of Science degree by taking, fewer than 30 hours is required for a master's degree, they probably would do that on their own.
Well, to me, that seems like the solution, because if you're somebody that needs to almost take the entire curriculum to get eligible for a master's versus somebody needs to take 3 or 4 classes, why? I mean, I don't.
Well, one of the reasons is you don't have to take 4 semesters of calculus, which has ended many engineering careers that I'm aware of.
Amen. Almost got mine, so I understand, but I don't know.
Robert, I think that that the avenue you're speaking of right now is available. I think if you took a technology degree and supplemented what's left out to get to a EAC degree, I think we'd have to have it reviewed and somebody say it was equivalent, but I would think the board would accept that now.
Well, I don't think it is, Steve, because I think our law, it says no technology or rule, whichever one says no technology. So I don't think there's technology plus being able to, what's the right word, not remedy it, but anyway.
Well, if you got a BS, you wouldn't even have to tell us you had a technology degree.
Well, but I'm seeing what Steve is saying, Robert. We look at that where
look at foreign degrees.
Well, I agree. No, and we're saying the same thing. So I don't even know why we need a rule change. Why don't we just say remedy your degree and go on? I mean, we do it with foreign degrees. You're exactly right, Steve.
I got the feeling that to take some of the technology degrees that the deans were talking about, it's going to be more than 3 or. They may only need to take 3 or 4 classes to qualify for masters in engineering, but I think it'd be a lot more classes than that to get the equivalent of an ABET EAC degree, which is what you're talking about. And it might be another 2 years or so.
That's right. That's exactly
Ricky,
right.
I think what they do,
that's also what I remember from Dr. Smith's analysis too.
I think what the schools do when they're looking at the technology degree to go into a master's degree, it'll depend on whatever master's degree they want to get. They're not going to say go back and take 2 years of calculus. They're going to look at the very minimum that it would take for that student to be successful in whichever master's program they choose to go in. And that's what they're going to ask them to take. And I think I agree with Rob. It's going to be much less than trying to convert that technology degree into a EAC degree.
I agree with that.
I agree with that also. This is Alton.
But
I know UT
agree with it.
Knoxville.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know that UT Knoxville Engineering has allowed architectural students to go into the master's program and specialize in structures. And they wouldn't have had to back up and take all the calculus and chemistry that an engineering student would.
But that gets into another thing about what level of what level are the people that are getting master's degrees? Are they really getting enough of the depth and breadth of what we need to do to make good engineers? I don't know. I'm not advocating. I'm just asking the question. And it's a frustrating question.
Yeah, I think that they're not getting the depth and breadth of an engineering EAC degree, but coupled with additional experience, I think we're producing an engineer that can do engineering and look out for health, safety, welfare. I mean, I think, I know that the people typically what we're talking about, the people who have applied for comedy with technology degrees have a lot of experience doing pretty much just what we all do. A lot of us do, put it that way. So I think the experience is a thing, Robert, that has to kind of overcome the curriculum shortcomings.
Well, it seems to me on the continuum of things, if on one end of the spectrum you've got a ABET accredited degree and 4 years of experience, and then the other end of the spectrum you got 12 years of experience and no degree, and we accept those that 8 years of experience, halfway in between that, and throw a master's degree on top of a technology degree, and that seems to fit just as far as
Rob, the 12-year experience thing still has an engineering accredited degree. That person just didn't and couldn't pass the EIT or the internal exam.
Okay. Well,
so they do have to have the EAC degree.
All right, then it did change, because back in the 70s, you didn't have to have that. I thought the whole thing was gone, so it's still there with a non-accredited.
It's
without the fundamentals exam. That's what it is. Okay.
That's right. Sorry if I misled you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Sorry that I'm not up to speed on that.
Although there is one state, Rob, that still does that. I don't know which one it is.
Okay, so hey, Steve, this is Alton. It seems to me that we've deliberated on this a little bit, and we seem to have kind of come down on with the opinion. I want everybody's consensus on this, that if we go back to, I want to restate this, that you'd have to have an ETAC accredited degree, or a degree from an ETAC accredited university. Then you'd have to have a master's degree from a university that's ABET, EAC accredited, undergraduate degree in engineering accredited. Then it sounds like everybody says 8 years. They're more comfortable with 8 years of experience. We may be able to give some partial credit of that 8 years for experience earned prior to the master's, but we need to sort of, if we're going to consider doing that, we need to settle on a number of years of credit that we would offer. Is that 2 years credit? Depending, it have to be a minimum of 5 years. If you have minimum of 5 years, would give you 2 years of credit. 4 years would give you 1 year of credit. Less than 4 years, 0 credit, or something like that. I'm asking everybody to think.
I'd say go with that, write it down, and let's get the discussion out there in the engineering community.
If it's okay with everybody, I'll try to do that tonight, and I'll email it to Michael tomorrow and let him distribute it out to the other members of the committee.
I guess, should we also, if that ability isn't there, deal with, maybe there's someone who has a ETAC degree that's close enough to a EAC degree that they could take some additional classes and be equivalent. Would we need that in a rule also, or do we have that now?
Hey, Steve, I think we have that now because I think we approved a couple of applicants that did that within the last year or two, because they took the additional classes and they had now the equivalent of an EAC. I mean, that was something that was looked at by either NCEES or Dr. Smith, one or the other, to say, yes, what they now have taken is equivalent. And so that's already there, I think.
Ricky, I'm going to disagree and probably need to get Wanda or somebody to weigh in, but I think the way, or maybe Maria, but I think our rule specifically says no engineering technology, so it doesn't matter how much they cure that, it can't be cured. So
I'll go find it because I rejected the application because it said a technology degree, but it was ended up being approved because it's now an equivalent EAC education. But I can probably find that.
Okay, you all have been approving some recently that if they had NCEES evaluate and they had the technology degree plus the master's, you all have been approving it.
That's what I remember because
was the master's under the master's rule, Wanda, with the 20 years experience?
No.
Okay. I don't remember that, but if you say that.
Yeah, because I had been telling them a flat no, that they didn't qualify because they had a technology degree. But then when you all looked at the application and saw that NCEES had said that it was substantially equivalent, you said they shouldn't be treated any differently than someone that had a degree that was out of the country. So y'all had been approving them.
And I'm pretty sure not speaking for Maria, but I'm pretty sure that we got Maria's opinion on that, or okay on it.
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
And when we get into this rulemaking process, if we need to make that more clear, Maria, I'm sure you can help us with that.
Absolutely. I think it would be very helpful to add clarifying language in the rule when we make the amendment. I'm happy to craft some language whenever I get, my hands on the actual language that we're going to use and move forward. I'll be happy to do that.
Well, I think what Alton summed up is that's kind of my understanding of what I've heard. A question that I have is, do we bring this up to the full board tomorrow for the full board to bless just this direction that we're talking about, even though it's not necessarily specific rulemaking yet? Does this need to be brought up at the full board meeting tomorrow?
Hey, Ricky, won't Steve report that in his committee report? What we're doing and what we've discussed?
So, yes, he would.
I will report it, I think, but I guess the question for Michael is, what's the department's timeline on the expectation for us to get this into official rulemaking? And I guess whatever that is, we would need to back into what we need to do potentially as early as tomorrow.
Well, there's no set timeline for it, but I think you guys have put on a good head of steam today, and really made some headway. Again, you all would need to vote on when Alton sends back a summary or whatever it is he's going to write up. I can disseminate that to you all, and then we'll have to have another committee meeting so that you all can vote on it before anything happens in terms of putting information out to the general public.
Well, let me ask you this, Michael. Would it be, rather than us rush that, and we can do it that if you think we need to, but would it be better to let that be drafted, sent to you, and then you send it out to the committee members for further discussion, and where we could take something to the board that's written down a little better than in April? Or do you want us to do it tomorrow?
No, that's you're spot on. That's exactly what I was saying. That you all need to agree collectively on whatever is submitted in writing. You all need to agree on that collectively so that it can pass out of this committee with a vote and then be presented to the full board for a full vote. So the next full board meeting is in April, and I don't see that getting it done right now so that it can be discussed and voted on, and then voted on again tomorrow would be prudent. I think that this would take some time and some thought on Alton's behalf if he's the one who's going to be putting the pen to paper.
Okay, how does that sound to the rest of the committee, that Alton would draft that, send it in, and if we need to have another meeting and an extra meeting in March, we could do that, or we could deal with it at our committee meeting in April with the idea that we would get it where we want it, vote on it, and be ready to take it to the board meeting in April.
Sounds good to me.
Me too. Sounds good.
I'm in.
I'm good.
Okay, I guess we know where we're going on that then. Is that, does that sound good, Michael?
Yes, sir. The only question I have is, do you want to convene in March would you like to set a date in March for this conversation to happen, or do you want to do it at the regularly scheduled committee meeting in April.
Hey, Steve, this is Alton. It's just my 2 cents. I'd rather go on and meet in March and let's get all the discussion sort of out of the way and make sure we're all in agreement on this thing moving forward so that we would be in a position to fine tune it and make it whatever fine tuning we're going to do, then get it sort of under our own approval, our committee's approval in April before we present it to the board.
I think I agree with you. That way we're not rushed to get something ready for the day after, you know.
Is everybody else okay with that? And Michael, I know you can set that meeting.
Yeah, we can set that meeting. How much time would you all like to draft it, to have a working draft so that we could have that meeting? I'm thinking the middle of March, potentially, maybe the week of the 15th, or we could go even earlier. We could say, today's February 3rd, so we could say a month from now on March 3rd.
I'd like, if possible, I'd like to avoid Wednesday afternoons. I've had to miss 2 meetings at work that reoccur, and they both hit on meetings they're every 2 weeks, and I missed them the past 2 times because of this meeting.
Okay. How about Tuesday, March 2nd or Tuesday, March 9th?
The second works better for me. I'm going to be out on March 9th.
Yeah, I'm gonna be out on the 2nd.
Yeah.
I've got commitments on the 2nd too.
Okay, let me throw out 2 more. The 11th, assuming that you're just out for the 9th.
I'm out for that week, but
okay.
Yeah.
So then we are looking at probably the week of the 15th. How about Tuesday the 16th?
As long as it's in the afternoon, I'm good.
Works for me.
I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Okay.
Too.
Great. We'll set this meeting, the follow-up meeting where we'll review the draft in the public meeting for 1 p.m. on March 16th. And I will send out the meeting invites for you, but go ahead and put a hold on your calendar. And I would say put a hold from 1 to at least 3:30 to be safe.
I agree. We tend to be long-winded.
Can you say that date again? I apologize. I wasn't paying attention. Just being honest.
That's Tuesday, March 16th, 1 p.m.
Okay, are we ready to leave this item now?
Okay, yeah, I think so, Steve. We've still got decoupling, master's degree, and international degrees to review.
I only have decoupling on my agenda.
Well, that's okay with me if we want to stop there, but I know that there were four items that we agreed to do our best to address, and
Yeah, master's degree needs to be on there. That was my item.
Yeah, that's my fault. I'll make the master's degree international.
Quite frankly, I think decoupling we've talked about, and with the exception of Rob, I really appreciate input and opinion on that. But for right now, we've had a lot of discussion on that already, and I think at least the four of us seem to be in some level at a consensus. But I'd like to give Rob the opportunity to weigh in also. And Steve, it's okay. I can go ahead. I think Rob, I know Michael's probably gone over this with you on the tutorial, but we're one of only 9 states, I think, that doesn't allow decoupling. One of the issues that I see, one of the biggest rationales for allowing decoupling is twofold for me. One is most of the exam preparers are in academia, and it's become more of an academic exam and a little less of a practice exam. The second thing is, if our organization, we are about the promotion and helping improve the path to licensure, then one of the things that I've noted, and I've been really fortunate to have been able to present to the senior engineering classes at Tennessee Tech. I think I'm about to do my 5th one there. I've been to Lipscomb. I've been to TSU. Ricky and I have been to Union University and the University of Memphis. And and I always ask this question. I explain to them what decoupling is. And we talk about the importance of licensure, and towards the end of that, I ask, and I always have a show of hands vote. And generally, there's 40 or 50 kids in the room. How many of them would take the PE if it were available immediately after they passed it, or after they took the FE and were out of school? And more than 95% indicate that they would take it if it were available right out of school. So again, if we're about improving or really improving or creating an opportunity for path to licensure, even for those kids who go into the workforce in locations like industry or construction, where oftentimes they don't pursue licensure, if we create that opportunity for them early on, that may reorient their position and move them more towards licensure, which I think, again, is our ultimate goal, to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare. We've had this discussion for, golly, I don't know how many meetings. And I think now, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I think our consensus is that I don't see any discernible reason not to allow individuals to take the PE right out of school, but still require, obviously, the 4 years of experience under the supervision of a licensed PE before they could actually have their license.
I agree. And I think for Rob's benefit, I think this one is a little bit different than the technology discussion, because where technology could be accomplished with a rule change, this wasn't a rule change. This was a law change, if I recall. Is that correct, Maria?
That's my understanding. Sorry, did you all hear me?
Yes, we did. I was just waiting to see if there was any. Thank you. I was just waiting to see if there's any other. No, we got you. So is there any other discussion from the committee?
Steve,
What does the law actually say now about that?
It requires, Rob, it requires that you graduate from a 4-year accredited university, take and pass the FE, have 4 years of progressive experience post-graduation, and then sit for and take and pass the PE.
So like requirement that I graduated in May and the exam was offered in April and November. And so the requirement that I actually had to wait until November to take the exam is I had to have 4 years of experience before I was even allowed to take it. And this would take that away. You could take the exam at any time.
Do y'all mind if I speak? Am I allowed to speak, Steve?
Yeah, go ahead, Casey.
Okay. Rob, essentially the issue is that we've got Kentucky allows you to take the test anytime. So you can graduate on a Tuesday, and if it's offered on a Friday, you can take it. So you can get, if you are licensed elsewhere, so you say you get your license in Kentucky, 4 years experience, et cetera, as long as you have all the pieces, you can still get your license in Tennessee through comedy. But if you took the test early in Kentucky and you're applying for your initial professional engineering license in Tennessee, then that's not allowed. And so the way I've been explaining it to, because we've got people who are just, for whatever reason, adamantly opposed to even talking about this. And the way I explain it to folks, because it's sort of just my opinion on it, is if I've got a royal flush and I drop my cards on the ground and I pick them back up and they're out of order, I still win the hand. You know, all the pieces are there. So the way our law works right now is that if you take the test out of order, you are not allowed to get your initial engineering license in Tennessee. Is that an easy way to explain that? No.
It is. That's right, Casey.
Casey, but hey, Casey, but I'll using your card analogy, unless the dealer tells you can't play because you've dropped them. So, and that's really what our rule says. Our law says that right now, Rob, is your initial licensure has to be in order. You have to go education or FE, education experience, but our comedy's not in order. We don't have to have any order. If you've got licensed in another state, you can have that out of order if you want to, but it's the order that our law prescribes.
So back to Connie's example, if I took the exam early in Kentucky and then I subsequently got registered in Kentucky, I could get my second registration in Tennessee without any trouble, right?
Yes, but you still have to have 4 years experience, and you still have to meet the components. You just don't have to do it in order.
Well, I think that's a no-brainer. We ought to change it.
Well, and we don't necessarily disagree. It's just getting that done there is some opposition from other engineers in the state about whether to do that or not. And the other
what is their argument?
Well, there's two arguments really. One is probably that's the way we've always done it argument. The second one is
that don't count.
Well, I understand that. I'm just telling you what the arguments are. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with. I'm just telling you what the argument is. The second one is that there are a lot of engineers that take a test in some discipline, but that's not the discipline they end up with. For instance, they'll take it in transportation, but they end up in environmental because their first job is where they get trained in environmental. So is that really applicable? The third reason is the data shows that to pass the test, you need to take the test in that 3 to 5 year window. I mean, it's a perfect bell curve on, and so are we kind of giving people a false sense of hope by saying, oh, take it whenever, when your odds of passing it are really damaged if you take it early. So those are the 2 or 3 reasons, one way or the other.
But some of that data, Rob, just in fairness, some of that data was derived in 2018, and many of the people who have passed the decoupling, I guess, law statute, only implemented it just in 2017. So we really don't have a lot of data points to compare that to.
And I think the other
but we
issue,
would be joining 41 other states that allow this.
That's correct.
It's not 41. There's still 20. I don't know. Alton, there's more than 9 states that don't allow this.
Yeah, Robert, you may be right.
Yeah, I think the issue it's just a growing issue. There were 9 who maybe approved decoupling, and the next year 3 or 4 more were added, and now it's all around us. It's not, but you're right. I don't think I don't think 40 states have adopted it yet, but it seems like at the national meetings we go to, that everybody is either looking at it or has passed it. And for what it's worth, I mean, I've stated, I think it is also a no-brainer. If somebody can pass the test the first year out of school, then we've protected the health, safety, welfare on that leg of the 3-legged stool. They pass the test, and I've never had a problem with decoupling. And just to be clear, we're talking about just decoupling the experience from accepting the application to take the PE. We're not talking about the degree or the FE, getting out of order from that. You still have to have the degree and the FE before you take the PE. I think generally in these tests that have decoupled.
Gotcha.
I also agree with the whole decoupling idea, but I do think we will run into some applicants that say they person takes the exam right after school and they don't meet that progressive experience, and then we're telling them after they've already passed the exam that no, you got to go get another year of experience or your experience is not appropriate. That's going to come down kind of hard on them, but that's just the way it'll be.
Point.
I'd rather get told I got to get another year of experience than I got to take the test again.
I agree.
But that is a different dynamic, Steve. You're right. In reviewing applications, that will be a little different. But I mean, that's part of our charge.
That's right. I think the issue that remains is who is going to take the bill before the legislature. And my recollection is, I don't know that the department wanted to do that, and weren't we waiting to see if the professional societies wanted to do that, or where are we on that?
This is Casey. Do I have permission to speak?
Yes.
I think there was a point where we were or maybe we means me, but I think there was some concern, and I certainly had it, that if we went to the legislature with a bill that opened up this section of the code without having solutions to all 4 areas of access issues, which are decoupling international degrees, engineering, technology, and masters, that if we were going to, rather than going back every year with like another little fix, that we would go in with, we've solved the problem and here are the 4, here's the solution to all of those areas at one time. Whether that was brought to the legislature by the industry / profession, or whether it was brought by you all. Either way, that would make more sense to just open it once, so that if somebody, so that it didn't get amended just to fix something else without any input. But y'all tell me if I'm wrong in that recollection.
Michael, do you know whether the department is interested in pursuing that legislation?
Not off the top of my head, but I will find out.
Just to answer the question, there's not anything in the governor's package that's already been submitted or not submitted yet that addresses this issue. And so if it comes from the governor's office, it will probably, unless I miss something, I believe that either way, with bill filing deadlines happening you know, in a week and a half, 2 weeks, that we probably, we might have missed that mark for the year.
Hey, Casey, this is Alton. I think that we had agreed that we weren't prepared to submit that this year. We were talking about fiscal year 2022 to do that.
That was my recollection as well.
One thing I'll mention, just I don't know if people saw it, but NCEES puts out their newsletter, their publication, and the December 2020. So the last one we received, the very first article on the inside is from the Nebraska NBA. John Wilbeck talking about going through the whole process of taking decoupling through the legislative process. It's exactly what we're talking about. And he recognizes it. I mean, they're ahead of where we are, but he apparently reading that and other things, it happens both ways. Either the board or the will approach or deal with the legislator, or the professional organizations will. But it sounds like, however it happens, that the board needs to have some pretty heavy involvement, because it's you know, these are the rules and laws that we're enforcing, and we sure don't want to, you know, have a mess. So I think it would be, I just can't imagine that we would not be heavily involved, however it actually happens, to kind of make sure that that those of us who are, you know, dealing with the effects of this are involved.
Well, that does put us on a little bit different timeline. You know, the rulemaking process versus the law change process.
Steve,
Seems to me
Alton
that,
again. I think one of the reasons I think that we were trying to attack all four of these at once is exactly what Casey said. You know, we don't need to go to the legislature with one item if we don't have all the other ones addressed. Plus, while we didn't think we could get this done, we didn't want to hurry through it and try to get it done in the legislative session, but we agreed to go ahead and start the conversation and try to come to a resolution on how our board felt about that. And then I think Casey, similar to what we're talking about doing with the other alternative paths to licensure, would take all of these issues to ACEC and TSPE, and I suppose others too, for reviews and comments.
Yeah, I don't know. It's Casey again. I believe that the discussion was that group, that same group that we talked about, rather than having sort of a separate decoupling conversation, a separate, you know, conversation for each of the four areas, to just put, whether we do it as in a group or in a you know, town hall, or we used the town hall meeting a couple of years ago, I think, when we first started the decoupling conversation. Like 4 years ago, maybe, at the engineers conference. I recall that being a very painful hour of our lives. But I think rather than doing one at a time, there's some that overlap. You know, that technology and the masters on some level overlap, and that kind of thing. That maybe it would be more efficient and to look at it from a broader perspective and do them all, have those conversations all of them.
That's right, Casey. That's my recollection too, and thank you.
well, just keep in mind that technology can be modified with a rule changing hearing not going through the legislature. I'm not saying we don't need to think about it all, but
No, but that's a really new development because Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the way that the law, we were reading the law that says engineering degree to be exclusive of an engineering technology degree, and that's the way I think our former legal team on this board or your legal team was also interpreting that. The current interpretation of the law is that it can be that issue is that it can be a rule change, but that was a brand new development, like in the last 2 meetings. Maria, am I right about that? We really saw it differently.
Yeah, Casey, the way I've looked at it, I've sent the committee members just a document that has the statute and then also the rule language. But I mean, the way I view it, the statute's very broad. It just says an approved, degree, and then so it's kind of wide open. It has the discretion and then in the rules it's very specific limiting language. So I think if we just open up the rules, it's a much more efficient path, and it gives this board the opportunity to have hands-on for what they want to see.
Yeah, I'm certainly not disagreeing with you on that. I think the interpretation when we started this discussion a couple of years ago, the interpretation of that was perhaps different, and we didn't know we could even consider a rule change, or you all didn't know you could consider a rule change. So that's why, Steve, that conversation has changed some since the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, is it the desire of the committee to move forward with our potential rule change in technology as we work later on the other items that require a law change?
Steve, we were kind of looking at how we put them all together and come up with a comprehensive solution because they are somewhat intertwined. And that's why we were looking at masters, decoupling, technology, and any changes to international that we needed to make at one time so that we had a comprehensive solution is the way I remember it.
See, this is Alvin. I agree with Robert. That's exactly my recollection too.
Okay, if we're going to do that, we may not be ready to have something to the full board in April.
See, again, this is Alvin. I don't think just because we're planning on moving all of these forward doesn't mean necessarily that we present them to the board. I mean, for review and consideration all at the same time. One of them involves a a law change. I believe the other ones may be, and Maria, you help me. Are they rulemaking changes instead of law changes?
Alton, I have to review that because I wasn't aware of the international issue, so I really need to get further into the statute and rules to give you a certain answer on that.
Either way, though, I think we move forward with the development of whatever we're going to do on all four. Some of them we may not be ready to present to the legislature until next year. The other ones that are rulemaking hearings, like Casey said, we can prove or demonstrate to the legislature that we've already taken action on these and we've demonstrated a proactive approach to consideration of alternative paths to licensure.
This is Maria. I just want to make one more point just to kind of set expectations for you all so there's no surprises. The department, whenever we are asked as board attorneys if our programs have any changes that they'd like made to statutes, even though, as Casey mentioned, the filing date, is coming up, here in February for 2021, but just because of the levels of approval that it has to go through, when the board attorneys ask, that's usually in May or June, the deadline for that we work and submit our package to the governor's office. So, for instance, if we wanted, you know, an amendment for next legislative session in 2022, I would have to have that language by, you know, this pretty much like this summer. So I just want you to know, you know, I don't want any surprises there for that piece, and just to set expectations for the board if it is something that you want this to come from the department rather than, you know, the association.
Well, I would suggest that at our meeting in March, that we just, you know, if we can come to an agreement on the technology situation, then we just move right on to the next one and see what we can get done. And, you know, we may have a long-term plan, but it seems that the rule change items can go first if that's what the committee and the board and the department wants us to do.
Steve, I think, this is Michael, I think that that's a great plan, the rule change items, you know, and the grander scheme of things are, I don't want to say, they're not easy, but, you know, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it's not, it doesn't involve the legislature. So we can, you know, we can take care of those and knock them off and then tackle the legislative items after that, if that's the will of the committee.
Well, I think we're getting to the point where we probably need to consider calling it a meeting and just know what we're up against for the next one. Does that make sense?
Steve, again, this is Alton. I mean, we've made really good headway on the ETAC degrees and decoupling. There's already a lot of initiative on the Washington Accord. I think that if we meet in March, we can, you know, hopefully we'll have a document that all of us, after each of us has reviewed it for the ETAC, past the licensure, we can have that and have it ready for Maria to get all of our consensus, have it ready for Maria to you know, convert it to a document that would fit our guidelines and criteria, and then represent that at the to our committee at the April meeting, at the April committee meeting for a final review. We can almost be done with that. But in the same, also during the March meeting, again, we've made headway on decoupling. I think we're not too far away from having our resolution about how we want to proceed. And again, we can probably, if we craft similar language to what we're talking about with the engineering technology degree, and again, give it to Casey for sort of public opinion and input, at least among the professional societies, we can go ahead and have that done, and then continue to move forward on that and have it well in advance, hopefully, of the Maria, to make a submittal, do you have to have the actual document in place, or can you just tell them, we're going to craft this in between May and when you come into the next legislative session, we'll have it prepared for your full review at the next legislative session. We don't have to have the full document ready to go in May, do we?
So I'll just tell you from years past, I've been asked to submit language that we'd like. So the language, you know, would need to be ready, and then from there, it's not like that's the final, language that's going to end up in the statute. I've worked in conjunction with, internally in the department, all the way to the commissioner's office, and then also in conjunction with the governor's office once that language is submitted. But it does need to be pretty much ready to go as far as what we'd like to see.
Okay, but again, that's something that we can probably craft and get to you and Michael so that you can disseminate it out among the engineering committee members, maybe fairly quickly. And then
absolutely. And also, I just want to add, I'm not trying to pressure. I don't want you all to feel pressure like, oh, we have to get this done. I just wanted to set that expectation that, if this is coming, if this is something you want in the governor's package, I just wanted to, kind of be forthright about how that timeline works. But by no means am I, saying that you have to get it done or to feel pressured to do this or even do it, through this avenue. This might be something that you all, the association might want to do this. I'm happy to do whatever. I just wanted to kind of let you know timeline-wise what we're looking at.
Okay, thank you for that. But again, I go back to, I think we've had a lot of forward momentum on the decoupling issue. I think we seem to be all in agreement. I'm not sure, I'd ask the committee's input on this, but can we not go ahead and craft proposed language and get it out to all of us for review and consideration, then discuss it more at our proposed March meeting, maybe even to a point where we're prepared to turn it over to Maria to format it in April?
I think so. And, then I think it's be up to Michael to determine if the department is interested in pursuing that or not.
And this is Michael, just to be clear, you're talking about two separate draft items to be reviewed and discussed for the March meeting, correct?
Michael, this is Alton. That's what I was proposing, yes.
Okay. I agree with you, Alton. I think you guys have come a long way since we started really focusing, and I think a lot of work's been done. And I think, getting these things off the list is going to free up some time. We can talk about other things. I know you guys like that.
Yeah, I'm going to want to talk about whether we can legally use the emojis to vote, the thumbs up or thumbs down emoji when we vote. I just curious about that.
I'm going to have to defer to legal on that. But I'm going to go, I think the initial answer is no, but it'd be fun.
Okay.
This is Alton. That's something Steve and I don't have to worry about.
So who will then be responsible for the second item? If Alton's going to take care of the first one, or Alton, will you be doing both of them?
I think that was really supposed to be my responsibility to begin with, decoupling part. So I'm glad to draft that. I probably won't have it to you tomorrow, but I will try to get it to you soon.
I'd say if you could try and have it to me at least a week before the March meeting, then that would give ample time for me to get it to the other committee members so that they can have time to read and reread as needed.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have a action plan for now. And does anybody want to have any further discussion? Or are you ready to adjourn?
Wait, are we going to talk about Masters, Steve?
Hey, Alton, I'm glad you brought that up because the Masters is my item.
Yeah, I wanted you to have something to do.
I'm going to do, I've already got it done. Hell, while we sitting around and talked about it, I fixed it. So, we, I've got what Louisiana did, and I'm going to propose something similar to that. It's going to take a lot more people a lot smarter in academia and understanding what the various curricula look like and all that kind of stuff. But I think I've got a path forward, and it makes sense to me that says your master's degree counts, but it depends on what your undergraduate degree. And it's like I said before, if your undergraduate degree is in photography, and you go get a master's in structural engineering, that should not count. There's too many gaps in there. So I think we need to come up with something like that and call it a day. But I'll propose that for our next meeting. And something else I'm going to recommend. We do keep spinning our wheels on a lot of stuff, and people are going, well, I didn't know we're supposed to do, I don't know who's supposed to do this. And, frankly, that's, we don't run our businesses that way. We don't run our professions that way. We need to have a list of who's supposed to do what, when, with some action items and some accountability, or we're still going to be talking. Again, discussion, get it. But we've been talking about who's going to present the language to the legislature now for 2 years, and that's, we need to do something. So please think about what you want to do on that, and let's come up with a solution to that as well at the March meeting. I think that's important as well, so we can stay on track once we get a path decided.
Hey, Robert, this is Alton. Are you talking about who in person would present this to the legislature? I know they go in front of committee meetings and somebody has to be there to speak on behalf of the legislation.
Sir. No, I'm just talking about, we've just talked now about on decoupling. Well, is it the societies? Well, is it this? And we've kind of had this discussion now for a long, long time. So let's put it on somebody, raise their hand, volunteer, whether it's whoever, whether it's the Commerce and Insurance Department. This is just one item. We've done this on other items too. It's the who, what, and when thing to me, and let's put that together and go do it and really get it done, so that there's some accountability, so that we get it done. I've got 3 more years left on the board. I hope that in 3 years we can have all these things done, so I can at least say that we got this part of it taken care of.
So you're going to have a draft of a suggestion to send to Michael, Robert, on your item there with the masters regarding similar to the Louisiana thing.
Yes, sir, I will.
Well, and I think that I was assigned international degree, and I haven't really done anything on that at this point, but I just sort of thinking out loud, I think it's based on the Washington Accord, and that part's kind of easy. The other part is somebody like Dr. Smith's evaluation.
And Steve, I suppose NCAAS's evaluation as a alternative.
Right. Well, on the international, we're doing that now. So is that is there a rule change or a law change in that?
Steve, I think part of the reason, the issue, and again, this is why we need to get, I know we record and we do notes and stuff, but it doesn't get into the level of detail and follow up of where we are. But I think part of the thing for international is having a flow chart, a checklist, or something that we can go down and say, okay, this is acceptable. Well, it's not. Well, then go to number 2. Well, now we need you to do this, and go to, we have some semi-defined process to go keep us on track when we're reviewing these things and making sure that we can give the applicant a pretty good, solid path going forward when they ask questions, because it does seem like it changes a little bit. That's my 2 cents.
But is that a rule or a law?
Probably a
This
rule
is
or
Maria.
a
I have to
policy.
look at that. Yeah, I'll be sure to check on that as well, just to see where the authority is and what the language is like.
Okay, well, I will try to do some research on that and get some ideas into Michael, and then we'll have all those things: technology, decoupling, masters, and international. Four things that we'll have to review in the March meeting.
Sounds like a great plan.
Sounds good.
Okay, anything else for today? I really want to thank Alton for suggesting that I be the chairman of this committee with all this going on, by the way.
Your skill level is pretty incredible at a very high level. Thank you for manning the meeting.
I think I'm going to lose the rest of my hair.
Steve, you're doing an excellent job. I'm really pleased to have abdicated that to somebody with a lot higher level of competence.
Well, I've gathered a new level of respect for those of you who have done it before. It's a whole different ballgame to lead a meeting than to sit and listen and make a comment every now and then.
I'm also really glad not to have to present this recap to the board tomorrow.
It'll be simple. Okay, if there's no other discussion, I think I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second it whether it's needed or not.
Everybody from program manager to honors to architect that we talked to, there's just a lot of.
I vote yes.
We did get confirmed.
Amen.
Very good. I think I have the prerogative based on that to just say we're adjourned. So thank you to everybody, and we'll look forward to getting things turned into Michael and reading everybody's drafts.
Thank you, gentlemen. Let me know if y'all need anything.
All right. You all take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being here, Rob, and enjoy your future company.
I just hope Rob Eric shows back up tomorrow.
On a scale that big would be interested in what we're doing, but we've got some irons.
Here, buddy.
I'll show up tomorrow.
Miss you guys. Miss you. Like, I feel like I haven't seen you in person in ages.
All right. Y'all take care.
See y'all.
Yeah. Great
See ya.
job.